Rain slammed against cracked asphalt like God himself was trying to drown Manhattan. Serena Vaughn sprinted through the downpour, her cheap dress shoes flooding with every step, resume folder pressed against her ribs like it could shield her from the storm tearing through the city. She was late. 23 minutes late for the interview that was supposed to save her from eviction, from the shut-off notices piling up on her kitchen counter, from the crushing weight of being 28 years old and completely out of options. When she saw the cathedral doors through the sheets of rain, she didn't think, she just ran, burst through those heavy wooden doors into warmth and light and the sudden deafening swell of a full orchestra. Her brain couldn't process it fast enough. The white roses cascading down every pew, the hundreds of faces turning toward her in perfect, terrible silence. And at the end of that impossibly long aisle, a man in a black suit who looked like he'd been carved from marble and violence, his gray eyes locking onto hers with the kind of focus that made her stomach drop straight through the floor. Before she could turn around, before she could explain that this was a mistake, two men in suits materialized on either side of her and started walking her forward, straight toward the altar, straight toward the most dangerous man in New York. If you're watching from your city right now, anywhere in the world, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's see how a broke girl from Brooklyn accidentally became the wife of a mafia boss. Bummed. The cathedral smelled like money and secrets. Serena's wet shoes squeaked against polished marble as the two men in suits guided her forward with hands that felt more like steel traps than human touch. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack a rib. The orchestra swelled. Something classical she didn't recognize because she'd grown up in a two-bedroom apartment where the only music came from car radios and late-night arguments through thin walls. "Wait," she whispered. "I think there's been—" "Keep walking," the man on her left said. His voice had the texture of gravel scraped across concrete. The aisle stretched forever. Every step brought her closer to the man waiting at the altar, and with each step, more details burned themselves into her brain with the clarity of pure panic. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in Renaissance paintings of tragic princes. Sharp jaw, expensive suit that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. And those eyes. Christ, those eyes were the color of winter storms, and they tracked her approach with the patience of a predator watching prey stumble into a trap. Serena's survival instincts were screaming at her to run, but the hands on her arms might as well have been handcuffs. The guests watched in silence, not the warm, teary silence of happy wedding attendees. This was the silence of people witnessing something they knew better than to question. When she reached the altar, her legs were shaking so badly she thought she might collapse. The man, the groom, apparently, stood perfectly still. Up close, she could see the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow, could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that probably had a name she couldn't pronounce. He leaned down, his mouth close enough to her ear that she felt his breath against her skin. "Trust me and survive," he whispered. 4 words, quiet as prayer, terrifying as a death sentence. Then he straightened, and a man in formal robes began speaking in a language that might have been Latin or might have been a fever dream because Serena's brain had officially stopped processing reality. She should have screamed, should have run, should have done literally anything except stand there while her entire life spun off its axis and crashed into something she didn't have words for. But the groom's hand closed around hers, warm and solid, and some deeply stupid part of her hindbrain decided that staying alive was more important than asking questions. The ceremony blurred, words she didn't understand, responses the groom gave in a voice that sounded like controlled thunder. At some point, someone placed a ring on her finger. Platinum, she noticed distantly, with a diamond so large it probably had its own insurance policy. Then the man in robes said something that must have been significant because the entire cathedral seemed to exhale as one. The groom turned to her, cupped her face with both hands, his palms rough against her cheeks, and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't romantic. It was a brand, a claim, a public declaration that tasted like expensive whiskey and felt like falling off a cliff with no idea where the bottom was. When he pulled back, his gray eyes held hers for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Moretti," he said. and Serena Vaughn realized she'd just married a complete stranger. Boss. The reception happened in a blur of champagne she was too terrified to drink, and congratulations from people whose smiles never reached their eyes. Women in designer dresses air-kissed her cheeks and whispered things like, "Such a surprise," and "Damiano works in mysterious ways," with voices that dripped poisoned honey. Men in expensive suits shook her hand with grips that tested her bones and studied her face like they were trying to memorize every detail for a report they'd file later. Through it all, Damiano Moretti stayed close, not touching her, but present, a dark star she orbited without choosing to. "Smile," he murmured at one point, his hand settling on the small of her back with possessive ease. "You're supposed to be happy." "I'm supposed to be in a job interview," Serena hissed back through gritted teeth that she forced into something resembling a smile. "I'm supposed to be—" "You are exactly where you need to be." His voice carried an edge that could cut glass. "And if you want to survive the next 3 hours, you'll play along." "Or what?" He looked down at her, and for just a second, something almost human flickered behind those cold eyes. "Or people will start asking questions. And when people ask questions in my world, the answers usually come with body counts." Serena's fake smile faltered. Damiano's hand tightened on her back. Not painful, but firm. A reminder. 2 more hours, then we'll talk. Can you manage that?" She wanted to say no. Wanted to scream that she was a college dropout who worked 3 part-time jobs and could barely make rent. That she had no business in a room full of people who wore their wealth like armor. That this was insane and illegal, and she was going to call the police the second she found a phone. But the way he looked at her killed those words in her throat. 2 hours, she whispered. "Good girl." The armored limousine smelled like leather and gunpowder. Serena sat pressed against the far door, as far from Damiano as the vehicle's interior allowed, while Manhattan blurred past tinted windows that she suspected were bulletproof. Her wedding dress, because apparently she was wearing a wedding dress now, a gorgeous silk nightmare that fit her perfectly, despite the fact that she'd never been measured for it, felt like a straitjacket. Damiano sat across from her, perfectly still, watching her with the focused attention of a scientist observing a particularly interesting specimen. "You going to explain," Serena said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts, "what the actual fuck just happened?" "Language." His tone was mild, almost amused. "Fuck you." One eyebrow rose. "There's the fire. I was wondering if you'd find it again." "Answer the question." Damiano leaned back, his suit jacket falling open enough that Serena caught a glimpse of a shoulder holster. Of course he was armed. Of course. "My name is Damiano Moretti," he said, like he was introducing himself at a cocktail party instead of explaining a kidnapping. "I run certain business interests in New York. Some legitimate, most not. This afternoon I was scheduled to marry a woman named Catalina Russo in a carefully arranged alliance between our families." "So where the hell is she?" "Excellent question." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "She disappeared approximately 4 hours before the ceremony, along with her security detail and, I'm told, roughly $3 million in jewelry that was supposed to be part of her dowry." Serena's brain stuttered. "She ran?" "Apparently she preferred theft and exile to being my wife. I'm trying not to take it personally." "This is insane. This is business." Damiano's voice hardened. "My grandfather built an empire over 40 years. When he died, he left very specific instructions in his will. I inherit complete control of the organization, all of it, every legitimate business and every shadow operation, on one condition. I had to be married before my 33rd birthday." That's medieval. "That's practical. My grandfather believed that a man with a family has something to protect, something to lose. It makes him strategic instead of reckless." Damiano's eyes never left hers. "My 33rd birthday is in 8 days. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. "So when your actual bride ran, I had 2 choices. Let the wedding fail and watch my grandmother seize control of everything my grandfather built, then immediately hand it over to rival families who would tear the organization apart in a civil war that would paint this city red." He paused. "Or find a replacement bride in the next 20 minutes. And you picked me." Serena's voice came out flat. A random woman who walked into the wrong building because she's too broke to afford an umbrella. Not random. Damiano pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and held it up. Serena stared at an email. Her email, the one she'd sent 2 weeks ago applying for an events coordinator position with Moretti Luxury Experiences. Her resume was attached. Her professional headshot smiled back at her from the thumbnail. You interviewed me? My assistant did. Screened 40 candidates. You made the top 5. Damiano pocketed the phone. When Catalina vanished, I had my people pull every applicant file from the past month who was single, approximately the right age and build, and desperate enough to show up to an interview in a thunderstorm. Your background check came back clean. No family except an ill mother in Brooklyn. No boyfriend. No criminal record. Student loan debt that would make a banker weep. 3 jobs that barely cover your expenses, and an eviction notice that's 2 weeks old. Serena felt sick. You had me investigated. I had everyone investigated. You just happened to be the most viable option when I ran out of time. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes. I know this is terrifying. I know you didn't choose this, but you're already in it now, and there's no clean way out that doesn't put you in danger. You could let me go. The moment you walked down that aisle, you became part of my world. Every family that attended that ceremony saw you. Every rival watching for weakness logged your face. If I let you go now, if the marriage falls apart before the ink is dry, it signals instability. And instability in my business starts wars. So I'm a prisoner. You're my wife. The way he said it made her skin prickle. Not possessive exactly. More like he was stating a fact of physics. Gravity exists. Water is wet. You are mine now. For the next year, you will live in my penthouse under my protection. You will attend events at my side. You will convince my family, my associates, and every federal investigator watching us that this marriage is real. And if I refuse? Damiano's expression didn't change, but something cold slithered through the air between them. Then I can't guarantee your safety, or your mother's, because the people who would benefit from my failure won't just come for me. The threat landed like a physical blow. You absolute... I'm not threatening you, he interrupted, his voice sharp. I'm explaining reality. You became a target the second you said, I do. The safest place for you now is close to me, where my resources can keep you alive. 1 year, Serena. Give me 1 year to secure my position and eliminate the threats circling this organization. In return, I'll give you $5 million, a new identity if you want it, and enough security to disappear anywhere in the world. $5 million. Serena's brain snagged on the number like a fish on a hook. 5 million. She could pay off every debt, could get her mother the medical treatment she needed, could actually, for the first time in her entire goddamn life, breathe without the crushing weight of poverty suffocating her. Why should I trust you? Because I need you alive more than I need you dead. Damiano sat back. A widower signals weakness. A husband signals stability. You're worth more to me breathing than buried. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement. It's the truth. And in my world, truth is rarer than diamonds. The limousine slowed, turning into an underground garage that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. Armed men in suits watched their approach with the casual alertness of people who'd seen too much to be surprised by anything. Damiano stood, adjusting his jacket. We're here. Where's here? Home. He offered his hand. You're home now, Mrs. Moretti. Serena looked at that hand, at the calluses on his palm, the faint scars across his knuckles, the platinum wedding band that matched hers, and realized she was completely, utterly fucked. But she took it anyway. The penthouse was a fortress disguised as luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan like a kingdom laid out for conquest. Marble floors, designer furniture, art that probably belonged in museums. But Serena noticed the cameras in every corner, the reinforced doors, the panic room hidden behind what looked like a bookshelf, the gun safe built into the wall behind a Rothko print. Your room is this way. Damiano led her down a hallway wide enough to park a car. He opened a door onto a space larger than her entire apartment. King bed with silk sheets. Walk-in closet already filled with clothes in her exact size. Bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people. How did you... I have efficient people. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her take it in. There's a security detail on every floor. Armed response team in the building. If you need anything, there's a phone by the bed that connects directly to my head of security. You're safe here. I'm a prisoner here. You're protected here. There's a difference. Serena turned to face him, and God, she was so tired. Tired of being scared. Tired of pretending she was holding it together when everything inside her was screaming. What happens now? Now you get some sleep. Tomorrow we start selling this marriage to the people who matter. Damiano straightened, and for just a second, something that might have been guilt flickered across his face. I know you didn't ask for this. I know it's not fair, but you're tougher than you look, Serena Vaughn. I saw it in your interview materials, saw it in the way you handled the ceremony without falling apart. You're a survivor. Don't pretend you know me. I don't, but I will. He started to leave, then paused. One more thing. The original bride, Catalina. If she's smart, she's already in another country with a new face. But if she's not, if she tries to come back and reclaim what she thinks is hers, stay away from her. She's dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with violence. Noted. He studied her for a long moment, those gray eyes searching for something she couldn't name. Then he nodded and left, the door clicking shut with the solid finality of a cell locking. Serena stood alone in her gilded cage, still wearing a wedding dress that wasn't meant for her, a ring burning on her finger like a brand. She walked to the window, pressed her forehead against cool glass, and looked out at the city sprawling below. Somewhere out there was her apartment with its water-stained ceiling and broken radiator, her mother's assisted living facility with its sterile hallways and mounting bills, the coffee shop where she pulled morning shifts, the tutoring center where she taught SAT prep, the restaurant where she waited tables on weekends. That life felt like it belonged to someone else now. She pulled out her phone, they'd let her keep it, surprisingly, and found 17 missed calls from her mother's nurse, 6 texts from her boss at the coffee shop asking where the hell she was, and 1 voicemail from the landlord threatening legal action. Serena deleted them all. Then she called her mother. Mom? Yeah, I'm okay. Listen, something came up. I got a new job. Really good pay. But I'm going to be out of touch for a while. No, I'm fine. I promise I'm fine. I'll send money for your treatments. Yes, enough to cover everything. Mom, I have to go. I love you. I'll call soon. She hung up before her mother could ask questions Serena didn't know how to answer. The wedding dress suddenly felt like it was suffocating her. She fought with the buttons, her hands shaking too badly to manage the delicate fabric, until she finally just tore the damn thing off and left it in a silk puddle on the marble floor. In the closet, she found pajamas. Expensive, soft, exactly her size because of course they were, and pulled them on with movements that felt mechanical. Autopilot. Shock, probably. She should have been panicking, should have been planning escape routes, calling lawyers, screaming at the universe for the cosmic joke her life had become. Instead, she climbed into the massive bed, pulled silk sheets up to her chin, and stared at the ceiling while her brain tried to process the fact that she'd woken up this morning as Serena Vaughn, broke and desperate, and was going to sleep tonight as Serena Moretti, wife of a Mafia boss she'd met 6 hours ago. The last thought she had before exhaustion dragged her under was that she still didn't know where the hell that job interview was supposed to have been. She woke to screaming. Serena bolted upright, heart slamming, the sound cutting through the darkness like a knife. It took her 3 disoriented seconds to remember where she was, why the bed was too soft and the room was too big, and why there was a wedding ring digging into her finger. The screaming came again, raw, animal, full of rage and pain. She grabbed the phone by the bed, her hands shaking. No dial tone. The thing was dead or disconnected or useless. Panic clawed up her throat as she threw off the covers and ran to the door, locked from the outside. Are you fucking kidding me? She pounded on the solid wood, then remembered the security cameras, looked up at the nearest one and screamed, "Let me out! Someone's hurt! Let me out!" Nothing. The screaming stopped. Silence crashed down like a wave, and somehow that was worse than the noise. Serena pressed her ear to the door, straining to hear anything. Footsteps. Voices. Something. Then faint. Get him to the car. Now. And someone clean this up before... The rest cut off as a door slammed somewhere in the penthouse. Serena backed away from the door, her breath coming in short gasps. Her phone. She needed her phone. She patted down the pajamas, no pockets, then remembered she'd left it by the window. She ran across the room, grabbed it, and her thumb was hovering over 911 when the bedroom door opened. Damiano stood in the doorway, and Serena's finger froze. He was still wearing his dress shirt from the wedding, but the sleeves were rolled up and there was blood on his hands. Not a lot, just enough to paint his knuckles red. "Put the phone down," he said quietly. "What the hell is going on?" "Put the phone down." Something in his voice made her fingers unlock. The phone clattered onto the nightstand. Damiano stepped into the room and she noticed the way he moved, careful, controlled, like every muscle was under absolute command. "You're safe. No one was hurt." "I heard screaming." "You heard discipline being delivered to someone who forgot his place." He walked to the bathroom, turned on the sink, and started washing the blood off his hands with methodical precision. "It won't happen again." Serena watched him through the open door, her brain struggling to match this man. This calm, controlled man scrubbing blood from his skin like he was washing off paint, with the person who'd kissed her in front of hundreds of witnesses just hours ago. "Who was it?" "One of my soldiers. He made the mistake of questioning my choice of bride in front of the wrong people." Damiano dried his hands on a towel, examining his knuckles. "I explained why that was inappropriate." "You beat him." "I reminded him of the chain of command." "With your fists." Damiano turned to face her, leaning against the door frame. The soft bathroom light cast his face in sharp relief, highlighting the scar through his eyebrow, the hard line of his jaw. "You're going to see things in this life that will disturb you. Violence, cruelty, decisions that don't fit into your understanding of right and wrong. But you need to understand something, Serena. Everything I do serves a purpose. Every punishment prevents a war. Every display of strength stops 10 challenges from people who think I'm weak. That doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it necessary." He pushed off the doorframe. "The door was locked for your protection, not to imprison you. If there's a threat in the building, I need to know you're contained and safe, not wandering into a situation you can't handle." "I'm not a child. You're an innocent in a world that eats innocence for breakfast." He moved closer, and Serena stood her ground, even though every instinct told her to back away. "That man who questioned you tonight, he's been with my family for 12 years. Loyal soldier, good at his job. But the second he implied you weren't worthy of being my wife, he became a problem. Because if one person questions you, others will follow. And if enough people question you, they'll question me. And if they question me, this whole empire crumbles and takes both of us down with it. So you had to hurt him." "I had to remind everyone watching that you are untouchable." Damiano stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Do you understand? You're not just some girl I married. You're Mrs. Moretti now. My wife. My partner. The future mother of my children as far as the world is concerned. An insult to you is an insult to me, and I don't tolerate insults." "This is insane." "This is survival." His hand came up and Serena flinched before she could stop herself. Damiano froze. Something that might have been pain crossed his face, quickly buried. He lowered his hand slowly, deliberately, and took a step back. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly. "Whatever else happens, whatever you see me do to other people, I will never raise a hand against you. That's a promise, Serena. The only one I can make that I know I'll keep." She wanted to believe him. God, some stupid part of her actually wanted to believe him. "The door will stay unlocked from now on," Damiano continued. "But if you hear anything, anything at all, that sounds like trouble, I need you to lock yourself in this room and call security. Can you do that?" Serena nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good." He headed for the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we have breakfast with my grandmother. She's going to test you in ways that make tonight look gentle." "Wait." The word came out before Serena could stop it. Damiano looked back. "The man you hurt, will he be okay?" Something that wasn't quite a smile touched Damiano's mouth. "He'll heal, and he'll think twice before opening his mouth again." He studied her face for a long moment. "You have a soft heart. That's dangerous in my world. But maybe—" He trailed off, shook his head. "Never mind. Sleep well, Mrs. Moretti." He left, the door clicking shut gently behind him. Serena stood in the middle of her gilded prison, shaking, trying to process what she'd just witnessed. The blood, the casual violence, the way Damiano talked about breaking a man's bones like it was a routine business decision. She should have been horrified. She was horrified. But underneath the horror was something else, something small and traitorous that whispered, "He did it to protect you." Serena climbed back into bed, pulled the covers up, and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion finally dragged her under again. When she dreamed of gray eyes and blood-stained knuckles, and a voice that promised safety in a world built on violence. Morning came with aggressive sunshine and the smell of fresh coffee. Serena woke to find a breakfast tray on the nightstand. French press, pastries that looked like they'd been imported from Paris, fresh fruit arranged with the precision of a still life painting. A note in sharp, masculine handwriting. "Eat. You'll need your strength." She ignored the food and headed for the bathroom, where she found the shower controls more complicated than a spaceship dashboard. It took her 10 minutes to figure out the right combination of levers and buttons that produced hot water, instead of scalding steam or Arctic blast. The shower helped. The pounding water washed away the sticky residue of last night's panic, leaving her brain clear enough to start thinking strategically instead of just reacting. Facts. She was married to a mafia boss. She was living in his penthouse. She was, according to him, now a target for anyone who wanted to hurt him. She had 1 year to play this role convincingly enough to survive, and at the end of it, she'd walk away with $5 million. $5 million. Serena had never made more than $30,000 in a year. $5 million was generational wealth, life-changing money. Enough to set up her mother for the rest of her life, with enough left over for Serena to finally stop living paycheck to paycheck. 1 year. She could survive 1 year of anything for that kind of payout. When she emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel that cost more than her security deposit, she found the walk-in closet had multiplied overnight. Racks of designer clothes in her size, shoes arranged by color and heel height, jewelry that probably required its own insurance policy. A woman in a crisp black suit stood waiting, her expression professional and utterly devoid of judgment. "Mrs. Moretti, I'm Elena, your personal assistant. Mr. Moretti asked me to help you prepare for breakfast with Mrs. Isabella Moretti. We have 45 minutes. I can dress myself." Elena's smile was polite steel. "I'm sure you can, but Mrs. Isabella has very particular expectations about presentation. If you'll allow me to guide you, we'll avoid any uncomfortable moments." Translation: If you show up looking wrong, the grandmother will eat you alive. Serena swallowed her pride. "Fine. What do I need to know?" 45 minutes later, Serena barely recognized herself in the mirror. The dress Elena had chosen was designer, Valentino apparently, in a deep navy that made her skin glow. Simple diamond studs in her ears, hair pulled back in a sleek bun that somehow made her look older, more sophisticated, heels that added 3 inches to her height and made her calves look like they belonged to someone who actually exercised. "Perfect," Elena said, circling her with an appraising eye. "Elegant but not flashy, respectful but not submissive. Mrs. Isabella will appreciate that you made an effort without trying to compete with her." Is she really that terrifying? Elena's professional mask slipped for just a second, revealing something that might have been sympathy. Mrs. Isabella built half of what the Moretti family controls today. She's 83 years old and sharper than most people half her age. "She will test you, Mrs. Moretti. Your job is to pass without breaking." "Great, no pressure. Just remember, direct eye contact shows respect. Don't fidget. Answer her questions honestly. She can smell lies from across the room. And whatever you do, don't apologize for being here. You're Mr. Damiano's wife. Own it." Serena took a deep breath, checked her reflection one more time, and followed Elena out of the bedroom. The breakfast room was smaller than she'd expected. Intimate, almost, with a table set for 3 and windows overlooking Central Park. Damiano stood by the glass, hands in his pockets, wearing a different suit than last night, but looking no less dangerous in daylight. He turned when she entered, and something flickered in his expression. Appreciation, maybe, or surprise. "You clean up well," he said. "Your assistant has magic powers." "Elena's one of the best." He crossed to her, and Serena fought the urge to step back as he reached out and adjusted one of her diamond earrings with gentle fingers. "My grandmother arrives in 5 minutes. A few rules. Don't lie to her, don't show weakness, and don't let her bait you into losing your temper. She'll try. It's how she measures people. Anything else? Yes. His hand moved to the small of her back, possessive and warm through the thin fabric of her dress. Remember that we're supposed to be in love. She needs to believe we're real. Can you manage that? Serena looked up at him, at this man who'd dragged her into his violent world without permission, who'd beaten one of his own soldiers for insulting her, who was asking her to pretend to love him in front of the woman who'd raised him, and decided that if she was going to survive this, she needed to commit to the role. I'm a better actress than you think, she said. Damiano's eyes searched hers. We'll see. The elevator chimed. Serena's spine straightened automatically as the doors opened and Isabella Moretti stepped into the penthouse like she owned it, which Serena realized she probably had until very recently. The woman was small, barely 5 feet tall, but she carried herself like a general surveying a battlefield. Silver hair pulled into an elegant twist, Chanel suit that probably cost more than a car, dark eyes that missed absolutely nothing. Those eyes landed on Serena and stayed there with the focused intensity of a laser. So, Isabella said, her voice carrying the faint rasp of someone who'd spent decades giving orders that people didn't dare refuse. This is the bride who replaced Catalina. Damiano's hand tightened on Serena's back. Nonna, may I introduce my wife, Serena Moretti? Serena, this is my grandmother, Isabella. Serena stepped forward, Elena's coaching echoing in her head. Direct eye contact, no fidgeting. Own it. Mrs. Moretti, she said, extending her hand. It's an honor to meet you. Isabella looked at the offered hand like it was a weapon. Then, slowly, she took it. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Tell me, child, Isabella said, still holding Serena's hand, still staring into her eyes like she could read her soul. How does an unemployed girl with 3 part-time jobs end up married to my grandson? The air in the room crystallized. Damiano tensed beside her, but Serena didn't look away from Isabella's penetrating stare. I walked into the wrong building at the right time, Serena said quietly. And your grandson decided I was exactly what he needed. Isabella's eyebrows rose. Direct. I appreciate that. She released Serena's hand and moved past her toward the breakfast table, settling into the head chair like it was a throne. Sit, both of you. Let's see if this farce can hold up through a single meal. It was going to be a very long breakfast. Breakfast with Isabella Moretti felt like being dissected alive by someone who'd perfected the art over 8 decades. Serena sat across from the woman, spine rigid, hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. Damiano sat to her right, close enough that his knee occasionally brushed hers under the table. Whether for her comfort or his own calculation, she couldn't tell. Isabella sipped her espresso with the deliberate precision of someone who did everything with purpose. She'd barely touched the food on her plate, too busy watching Serena like a hawk studying a mouse. So, Isabella said, setting down her cup with a delicate clink, Damiano tells me you have a degree in communications, from a state school. The emphasis on state school landed like a slap. I dropped out junior year, Serena said evenly. My mother got sick. The medical bills were more important than a diploma. How noble. Isabella's tone suggested it was anything but. And what exactly were you doing before you became my grandson's wife? Working 3 jobs, trying to keep my head above water. 3 jobs. Isabella's dark eyes glittered. Coffee shop, tutoring center, and what was the third? A restaurant, I believe? Of course she knew. Of course Damiano had told her everything. Italian place in Brooklyn, Serena said. I waited tables on weekends. How fitting. Isabella dabbed her mouth with a linen napkin. Tell me, child, do you love my grandson? The question hit like a brick through a window. Direct, brutal, designed to shatter whatever facade Serena had managed to construct. Damiano's hand found hers under the table. Warm, steady. A lifeline or a warning, she wasn't sure which. I know what this looks like, Serena said carefully. Girl from nowhere marries a man she just met. But sometimes I asked if you love him, not for a story. Serena met Isabella's gaze and made a choice. The truth would get her killed, but a weak lie would be worse. I don't know yet, she said quietly. But I'm here, and I'm not running. The silence that followed felt like standing on a cliff edge waiting for the ground to give way. Then Isabella smiled. It was small, sharp, and utterly terrifying. At least you're honest, the old woman said. Catalina would have fed me pretty lies until I choked on them. She turned to Damiano. This one has a spine. Let's see if she has the stomach to match. Damiano's grip on Serena's hand tightened for just a second before he released her. Nonna. Don't nonnas me. Isabella's voice could have cut steel. You married this girl to save your inheritance? Fine. Your grandfather's will left you no choice. But if you think I'm going to hand over control of this family's assets to a boy playing house with a stranger, you're more foolish than I thought. I'm not playing. Then prove it. Isabella stood, and both Damiano and Serena rose automatically. You have 6 months to convince me this marriage is real. 6 months to show me she's not a liability. Because if I find out she's a weakness someone can exploit, if I discover she's here for money and nothing else, I will end this arrangement myself. Am I clear? Crystal, Damiano said, his voice dangerously quiet. Isabella turned that razor focus back to Serena. Welcome to the family, child. Try not to get yourself killed. She left the same way she'd arrived, like a storm passing through, leaving destruction in its wake. The elevator doors closed, and Serena sagged against the table, her legs suddenly unable to hold her upright. Jesus Christ, she breathed. Damiano poured himself a drink from the bar cart in the corner. Whiskey, neat, at 9 in the morning. You did well. I feel like I just survived an execution. You essentially did. He downed the whiskey in one swallow. My grandmother doesn't bluff. If she thinks you're a threat to this family, she'll remove you, permanently. Serena's stomach turned over. You could have warned me. Would it have helped? No, but still. Damiano set down the glass and turned to face her fully. In the morning light, he looked tired. Not physically. His suit was crisp, his posture perfect, but tired in a way that lived behind his eyes. She gave us 6 months. That's more than I expected. 6 months to prove we're in love when we've known each other for less than 24 hours. Then we'd better be convincing. How? Serena's voice cracked despite her best efforts. I don't know how to be a Mafia wife. I don't know the rules. I don't know. You learn. Damiano crossed to her, and this time she didn't flinch when he reached out to tilt her chin up with gentle fingers. You watch. You listen. You adapt. It's what you've been doing your whole life, isn't it? Surviving. This is different. It's only in scale. His thumb brushed across her jaw, and the casual intimacy of it made her breath catch. Elena will teach you what you need to know, how to dress, how to speak to my associates, how to navigate events without making mistakes that could get you hurt. But the rest, the part where you convince the world you chose this, that has to come from you. I don't know if I can. You already are. His eyes searched hers with an intensity that made her feel exposed. You stood up to Isabella without breaking. You walked down that aisle yesterday even though you were terrified. You're stronger than you think, Serena. You just need to start believing it. She wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she was barely holding herself together with duct tape and denial. But his hand on her face felt like an anchor, and God help her, she needed something solid to hold on to. What happens now? She whispered. Now we go to work. Damiano stepped back, the moment breaking like glass. I have meetings all day. You'll spend it with Elena. Tonight we have dinner with 3 of my captains and their wives. Consider it your debut. More tests? Always more tests. He checked his watch. A platinum piece that probably cost more than a car. But tonight's different. Tonight they'll be watching to see if I'm weak. If you're a liability. If this marriage was a mistake that's going to cost them their livelihoods. No pressure. You can handle it. He started toward the door, then paused. One more thing. My bedroom is at the end of the hall. If you need anything at all, don't hesitate. Then he was gone, leaving Serena alone in the breakfast room with cold coffee and the lingering ghost of his touch on her skin. Elena arrived an hour later with the energy of a drill sergeant and the patience of a kindergarten teacher. We have 8 hours, she announced, setting down a leather portfolio thick enough to be a weapon. By tonight, you need to know the names and faces of every captain in Mr. Moretti's organization, their wives, their business interests, and which topics are safe versus which will get you killed. Serena stared at the portfolio. You're joking. I don't joke about survival. Elena opened it to reveal photographs, dossiers, and what looked like a goddamn organizational chart. This is Marco Santino, second in command, runs the construction business, which is actually money laundering and union control. His wife, Angela, hates other women on principle. Don't compliment her dress, don't ask about her children, and for God's sake, don't mention that she's had work done, even though it's obvious. How is any of this going to help me? Elena looked up, her expression softening slightly. Because in this world, information is the only currency that matters. You know who to trust, who to avoid, and who's likely to put a knife in your back the second Mr. Moretti looks away. You survive by being smarter than they expect and harder to kill than they hope. Serena's head was already spinning. I'm not cut out for this. You walked into a Mafia wedding by accident and managed to marry the boss without getting shot. I'd say you're more cut out for this than you think. Elena tapped the first photograph. Now, Marco Santino, what's his tell when he's lying? How the hell would I know? You're about to learn. He touches his left cuff link. Twice. Always twice. Watch for it tonight. They drilled for hours. Names. Faces. Business interests that were really criminal enterprises dressed in corporate clothing. Elena taught her how to shake hands, firm but not aggressive, how to make small talk without accidentally revealing something classified, how to read a room full of dangerous men and their calculating wives. By hour 4, Serena's brain felt like it was leaking out her ears. Break, Elena announced mercifully. You're starting to mix up the Russos and the Costellos, which could be fatal. Serena collapsed onto the sofa, rubbing her temples. This is insane. This is Tuesday. Elena poured 2 glasses of water, handed one to Serena. You're doing better than I expected. Honestly, most people shut down after the first hour. Most people haven't been scraping by on 3 hours of sleep and pure adrenaline for the past decade. Something that might have been respect flickered across Elena's face. Mr. Moretti chose well, even if he didn't know it at the time. He chose someone desperate enough to not have options. He chose someone who wouldn't shatter under pressure. Elena sat across from her, and for the first time since they'd met, her professional mask dropped slightly. Can I give you some advice? Off the record? Please, don't fall in love with him. The words hit like a punch to the gut. What? I've worked for the Moretti family for 6 years. I've seen a dozen women try to capture Damiano's attention. Beautiful women, sophisticated women, women who understood this world and knew how to navigate it. Every single one of them thought they could be the exception, the one who made him care. And every single one of them ended up discarded the moment they became inconvenient. Elena's eyes held a warning Serena couldn't ignore. Damiano Moretti is brilliant. He's strategic. He's even capable of kindness when it serves his purposes. But he's not capable of love. Not the kind you're probably imagining. His world doesn't allow for it. Serena thought about the way he'd touched her face this morning, the way he'd promised never to hurt her, the exhaustion behind his eyes. What if you're wrong? Then you'll be the first woman in history to crack that particular safe. Elena stood, her professional mask sliding back into place. But I wouldn't bet my life on it. And in this world, that's exactly what you'd be doing. What? By the time evening arrived, Serena felt like she'd crammed for finals while running a marathon. Elena had transformed her again. Different dress, this time in emerald silk that clung in ways that made Serena feel exposed and powerful simultaneously. Hair down in loose waves, makeup subtle but expertly applied. The same wedding ring and diamond studs, because apparently those were non-negotiable. Remember, Elena said, giving her one final inspection, you're not here to impress them. You're here to show them that questioning you is the same as questioning Mr. Moretti. Confidence, always confidence. Fake it till I make it? Fake it till it's real. Damiano was waiting in the living room, and when he turned to look at her, something flickered in his expression that made her pulse kick. You look... He stopped, seemed to reconsider his words. Good. You look good. Elena's a miracle worker. Elena's competent. You're the miracle. He offered his arm, and Serena took it, feeling the solid muscle beneath his suit jacket. The car's waiting. Last chance to back out. And go where? Fair point. They headed toward the elevator, his hand warm against hers. Tonight's going to be interesting. Marco's already been asking questions about you. Wants to know where you came from, why I chose you over Catalina. What did you tell him? The truth. That Catalina ran and you were available. Serena stumbled slightly, and Damiano's grip tightened to steady her. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement. It's honest. Marco respects honesty more than romance. The elevator arrived, and they stepped inside. But his wife Angela is going to be a problem. She and Catalina were close, practically sisters. She's going to see you as an interloper. Great. Just don't let her bait you. She'll try to make you cry or lose your temper. Either one makes you look weak. The elevator descended, and Serena watched their reflection in the polished metal doors. They looked like they belonged together, his dark suit and her emerald dress, his commanding presence and her carefully constructed poise, like a real couple. Can I ask you something? Serena said quietly. Depends on the question. Do you actually want this? The empire? The power? All of it. Damiano was silent for a long moment. The elevator hummed around them, dropping through floors. I was 8 years old the first time I saw my grandfather kill someone, he said finally. The man had stolen from the family. Not much. A few $1,000s. But my grandfather brought me to the warehouse where they'd tied the thief to a chair, and he handed me a gun. Serena's breath caught. He told me that leadership meant making hard choices, that mercy was weakness, that the family came before everything, even conscience. Damiano's jaw tightened. I was 8. I didn't pull the trigger. My grandfather did it himself, and then he told me I'd failed my first test. Jesus. I spent the next 20 years proving I wasn't weak, proving I could make the hard choices, proving I deserved to inherit what he'd built. The elevator slowed, approaching the garage level. So do I want this? I don't know anymore, but I've paid for it with pieces of myself I'll never get back. Walking away now would make all of that meaningless. The doors opened onto the underground garage, where a black SUV waited with armed men flanking it. I'm sorry, Serena said softly. Damiano looked at her, and for just a second, the mask cracked enough that she saw the 8-year-old boy underneath. Don't be. I made my choices, just like you're making yours. He guided her toward the SUV, his hand settling on the small of her back in a gesture that was becoming familiar, almost comfortable. Remember, he murmured as they approached the vehicle. We're in love. We can't keep our hands off each other. I look at you like you're the only woman in the world, and you look at me like I hung the moon. Can you do that? Serena thought about Elena's warning, about falling in love with a man who wasn't capable of it, about all the ways this could destroy her. Yes, she said. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that maybe she wasn't entirely pretending anymore.
Bad days.
The restaurant was the kind of place that didn't have prices on the menu because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. Private room in the back. Wine that probably cost more per bottle than Serena used to make in a month. Armed security disguised as waitstaff. And 4 couples seated around a table that felt more like a negotiating table than a dinner party. Marco Santino looked exactly like his photograph. Mid-50s, graying hair, expensive suit that couldn't quite hide the gun at his hip. His wife Angela was stunning in the way of women who'd spent a fortune maintaining their looks. Cold eyes, calculating smile. The other 2 captains, Luca Romano and Vincent Costa, sat with their respective wives, all of them watching Serena like she was a science experiment that might explode. Damiano made introductions with easy confidence, his hand never leaving Serena's back, playing the part of besotted newlywed so convincingly that she almost believed it herself. Serena, Marco said, rising to shake her hand. His grip was firm, testing. Welcome to the family. We were all surprised by the sudden change in plans. Life's full of surprises, Serena said evenly. Indeed. Marco gestured to his wife. Angela, this is Damiano's bride. Angela's smile was poison wrapped in politeness. How lovely. I have to say, we were all devastated when Catalina disappeared. She was like a daughter to me. There it was, first shot fired. I'm sorry for your loss, Serena said, and meant it. It must have been difficult. Difficult doesn't begin to describe it. Angela's eyes were ice chips. Catalina and I spoke just days before the wedding. She was so excited, so in love with Damiano, and then she just vanished, like she never existed. Damiano's hand tightened on Serena's back. A warning or support, she couldn't tell. Sometimes people aren't who we think they are, Serena said carefully. Sometimes they make choices we don't understand. And sometimes, Angela said, leaning forward slightly, they're running from something, or someone. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Marco cleared his throat. Angela? I'm just saying, Angela continued, her gaze never leaving Serena's face. It's strange, don't you think? A woman disappears, and within hours there's a replacement, almost like it was planned. It wasn't planned, Damiano said, his voice carrying an edge that made everyone at the table tense. It was necessity, and my wife doesn't need to defend her presence here to anyone. Of course not. Angela sat back, satisfied that she'd drawn blood. I'm just concerned. We all are. The family has to be protected. The family is protected, Damiano said flatly. By me, as it has been, as it will continue to be. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Then Luca Romano, the youngest of the captains, raised his wine glass. To new beginnings, he said diplomatically, and to Damiano and Serena, may your marriage be long and prosperous. Everyone drank, even Angela, though her eyes promised this wasn't over. The rest of dinner passed in carefully controlled conversation. Business discussions that sounded legitimate, but Serena recognized from Elena's training as coded talk about operations she was better off not understanding. The wives traded gossip and subtle insults disguised as compliments. Through it all, Damiano played his part perfectly. His hand found Serena's under the table. He leaned close to whisper things that looked intimate but were actually strategic observations. Marco just touched his left cufflink twice. He's lying about the construction delays. When she laughed at something Luca said, Damiano's arm slid around her shoulders, possessive and warm. To anyone watching, they looked like newlyweds who couldn't get enough of each other. And the terrifying part was how easy it was to pretend. By the time dessert arrived, Serena's face hurt from maintaining a smile. But she'd survived. No major mistakes. No breakdowns. Then Angela struck again. Serena, dear, she said, her voice dripping false sweetness. I'm curious. What exactly did you do before you married Damiano? I heard something about retail. The table went silent. Damiano's hand found Serena's thigh under the table, squeezing gently. Don't take the bait. But Serena was tired of being tested, tired of being treated like she didn't belong. I worked 3 jobs, she said clearly. Coffee shop, tutoring center, and a restaurant. 60-hour weeks trying to keep my mother alive and my rent paid. Not glamorous, but honest. Angela's smile sharpened. How admirable. Though I have to wonder, doesn't the transition feel a bit overwhelming, from serving coffee to sitting at tables like this one? The coffee was better, Serena said sweetly, but the company's more interesting. Luca snorted into his wine glass. Even Marco's lips twitched. Angela's expression went cold. I'm sure Catalina would have appreciated your sense of humor. Angela. This time it was Marco who spoke, his tone carrying clear warning. That's enough. Enough! Angela's mouth snapped shut, but her eyes promised murder. Damiano stood smoothly, pulling Serena up with him. This has been lovely, but my wife and I have an early morning. Marco, we'll discuss the construction situation tomorrow. Luca, Vincent, thank you for coming. They made their goodbyes, polite and efficient, and escaped into the night. The SUV was waiting. Damiano handed her in first, then slid in beside her, and the moment the door closed, the careful facade shattered. Jesus Christ, Serena breathed, her hands shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. You were perfect. Damiano's voice was rough with something that might have been pride. The coffee comment? That was brilliant. I thought she was going to stab me with her dessert fork. She wanted to, but you won. He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. You stood up to her without losing your composure. That's all that matters. She hated me. She hated that you didn't break. The SUV pulled away from the curb, heading back toward the penthouse. Angela's used to controlling rooms through intimidation. You refuse to be intimidated. That makes you dangerous. I'm not dangerous. I'm a girl from Brooklyn who's in way over her head. No. Damiano turned to face her fully, and in the dim light filtering through tinted windows, his eyes looked almost gentle. You're my wife. And tonight, you proved you belong at that table just as much as any of them. Serena wanted to believe him, wanted to feel like she'd actually accomplished something instead of just surviving another test by the skin of her teeth. But all she felt was exhausted. Can I ask you something? She said quietly. Always. Catalina, did you love her? The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Damiano was shanfied for a long moment, his thumb tracing absent patterns on the back of her hand. I barely knew her, he said finally. Our engagement was arranged by our families when we were teenagers. We met maybe a dozen times over the years. Formal dinners, strategic appearances. She was beautiful, well-trained, perfect for the role she was supposed to play. But love? He shook his head. That was never part of the equation. Do you think she loved you? I think she loved the idea of being Mrs. Moretti, the power, the status. But me? The actual person underneath all of this? He gestured vaguely at himself. No, she didn't know me well enough to love me. That's sad. That's practical. His hand tightened on hers. Love makes you weak, makes you vulnerable, makes you care about things that can be used against you. My grandfather understood that. It's why he built his empire on fear instead of affection. Is that what you want? An empire built on fear? I want an empire that survives, Damiano said. Everything else is secondary. The SUV pulled into the underground garage, and they rode the elevator up in silence. When they reached the penthouse, Serena headed straight for her room, desperate for a shower and the blessed oblivion of sleep. But Damiano's voice stopped her. Serena, she turned. He stood backlit by the city lights streaming through the windows, and for just a second, he looked vulnerable, almost human. Thank you, he said quietly. For tonight, for not running, for being stronger than I had any right to expect. Something in her chest cracked open. You're welcome. She made it to her room, locked the door, and collapsed against it, her heart pounding. Elena's warning echoed in her head. Don't fall in love with him. But it was already too late to heed that advice. The next 2 months passed in a blur of dangerous normalcy. Serena learned to navigate Damiano's world with increasing confidence. Attended charity galas where criminal enterprises masqueraded as philanthropy. Made small talk with wives who smiled to her face and sharpened their knives behind her back. Memorized faces, names, and the complex web of alliances that kept the Moretti Empire from tearing itself apart. And somewhere in the middle of it all, the fake marriage started feeling real. It happened in small moments. Damiano waiting up for her when she attended events alone, his relief visible when she walked through the door safely. The way he memorized how she took her coffee, 2 sugars, splash of cream, and had it ready every morning. The bodyguards who appeared outside her mother's assisted living facility without fanfare, ensuring she was protected even when Serena wasn't there to watch over her. They fell into a routine. Breakfast together when his schedule allowed. Evenings spent in comfortable silence, him working through paperwork while she read or researched the legitimate businesses she was supposedly helping to manage. Occasional touches that lasted longer than necessary. Conversations that went deeper than strategy. One night, 6 weeks into their arrangement, Serena found him in his study at 2 a.m, surrounded by financial reports and looking like he hadn't slept in days. You're going to kill yourself, she said from the doorway. He looked up, and the exhaustion in his eyes made her chest ache. Just finishing some projections. At 2 a.m. It's when I think clearest. She crossed to his desk, took the papers from his hands despite his protest, and set them aside. Come on, you need sleep. Serena, don't argue. I've watched you run yourself into the ground for 6 weeks. One night of actual rest won't destroy your empire. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. You're bossy when you're tired. I'm bossy all the time. You're just usually too busy to notice. He stood, and she realized how close they were. Close enough that she could see the faint stubble on his jaw, smell the cologne that had become familiar, feel the heat radiating off his body. Thank you, he said quietly, for caring. Someone has to. His hand came up to cup her face, and this time she didn't flinch, didn't pull away, just leaned into the warmth of his palm and let herself have this one moment of honesty. Serena. Her name on his lips sounded like a confession. I need to tell you something. What? But before he could answer, his phone erupted with the sharp buzz of an emergency alert. Damiano grabbed it, his expression shifting from vulnerable to lethal in a heartbeat. He read the message, and every muscle in his body went rigid. "What is it?" Serena asked, fear coiling in her stomach. "Catalina." His voice was ice. "She's back, and she's talking to the feds." The words hit like a freight train. Everything, the fragile peace they'd built, the careful facade, the growing connection between them, shattered in an instant. Because if Catalina was talking, the entire empire was at risk, and Serena's carefully constructed new life was about to burn to the ground. The penthouse exploded into controlled chaos within minutes. Damiano's phone lit up like a war room switchboard. Calls from Marco, Luca, Vincent, every captain in the organization demanding answers, contingency plans, damage control. He paced the length of his study with the phone pressed to his ear, his free hand raking through his hair hard enough to hurt. Serena stood frozen by the desk, her heart hammering so hard she thought her ribs might crack. Catalina was talking to the feds. The woman who was supposed to be gone, who'd disappeared with millions in jewelry and left Damiano scrambling for a replacement bride, had resurfaced at the worst possible moment. "I don't care what it costs," Damiano snarled into the phone. "Find out what she's told them. Every word, every meeting. I want transcripts, recordings, surveillance footage from every federal building in the tri-state area, and I want it yesterday." He ended the call and immediately dialed another number. His movements were precise, controlled, but Serena could see the rage simmering underneath, the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched so tight she thought his teeth might shatter. "Marco, get everyone to the safe house on 47th. 1 hour. No, I don't give a fuck about the construction meeting. Cancel it. This is priority 1. Pause. Because if Catalina knows even half of what I think she knows, we're all going to prison or worse. Move. Now." He threw the phone onto the desk hard enough that Serena flinched at the crack of expensive technology hitting wood. "Damiano, not now." His voice was granite. He crossed to a concealed panel in the wall, pressed his palm against it, and it swung open to reveal a safe. Inside were stacks of cash, several passports, and 3 handguns. Serena's stomach dropped. "What are you doing?" "Preparing for the worst." He pulled out one of the guns, checked the magazine with practiced efficiency, and tucked it into his waistband. If Catalina's cooperating with federal investigators, they'll move fast. Warrants, raids, asset freezes. I need to secure our position before they can lock everything down. "Our position?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression made her blood run cold. Not anger directed at her, something worse. Calculation. "You need to call your mother," he said quietly. "Tell her to pack a bag. One of my men will pick her up within the hour and take her somewhere safe." "Safe from what?" "From whatever's coming next." Damiano pulled out his phone again, typing rapidly. "If the feds think they can use her as leverage against you, against me, they will. She needs to be unreachable." The reality of it crashed over Serena like a tidal wave. This wasn't just about Damiano's empire anymore. This was about her, about her mother. About the life she'd built in the last 2 months, fragile and complicated and dangerous, but hers, shattering into pieces she'd never be able to put back together. "This is insane," she whispered. "This is survival." He crossed to her, gripped her shoulders with hands that were steady despite the storm behind his eyes. "Listen to me very carefully. The next 72 hours are going to determine whether this organization lives or dies, whether we end up behind bars or 6 feet under. I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Serena thought about Elena's warning, about falling in love with a man who couldn't love her back, about all the ways this had been destined to destroy her from the start. "Yes," she said, and meant it. Something flickered in his expression. Relief, maybe. Or regret. "Good." He released her and grabbed his suit jacket from the back of his chair. "Stay in the penthouse. Don't answer the door for anyone except my security team. If something goes wrong, if you even suspect something's wrong, there's a panic button under the kitchen counter. Press it, and armed response will be here in 90 seconds. "Where are you going?" "To find out exactly what Catalina told the feds and how much damage she's done." He paused at the door, his hand on the frame. "And to remind some people that betraying the Moretti family comes with consequences." Then he was gone, and Serena was alone in the vast, empty penthouse with nothing but her racing thoughts and the sound of the city humming 20 floors below. She called her mother. The conversation was brief, clipped, full of lies that tasted like ash in her mouth. "Mom, I need you to do something for me. Don't ask questions, just trust me. A man named Carlo is going to come to your facility in about 30 minutes. He's going to take you somewhere safe for a few days. I know it sounds crazy, but please, just go with him." Her mother's voice was weak, confused. The medication made her foggy. "Serena, sweetheart, what's happening? Are you in trouble?" "I'm fine. Everything's fine. This is just a precaution." "You're lying. I can always tell when you're lying." Serena's throat closed up. "I'm sorry. I can't explain right now, but I promise as soon as this is over, I'll tell you everything. Please, Mom, just trust me one more time." Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "Okay, baby, but you better keep yourself safe. You hear me?" "I will. I love you." "Love you too." The call ended and Serena stood in the middle of the kitchen, shaking, trying to remember how to breathe. This was real. This was happening. The careful house of cards she and Damiano had built was collapsing, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She spent the next hour pacing, checking her phone obsessively for updates that didn't come, staring out the windows at the city lights, and wondering if this was the last night she'd spend as a free woman. When her phone finally buzzed, she lunged for it. Unknown number. Text message. 3 words that made her stomach drop straight through the floor. "We need to talk. See Catalina." Serena stared at the message like it might bite her. How the hell did Catalina have her number? How did she even know Serena existed? Another text arrived before she could process the first. Rooftop garden. Pierre Hotel. Midnight. Come alone or I go straight to the feds with everything I know about you. Ice flooded Serena's veins. Everything I know about you. What the hell did that mean? But the... Oot. She should have called Damiano immediately, should have shown him the messages and let him handle it. That's what a smart person would do. But the last line stopped her. Come alone, or I go straight to the feds. If Catalina had information about Serena, real information, not just speculation, and she shared it with federal investigators, Damiano's entire operation could crumble. The marriage would be exposed as a fraud. The contracts, the arrangement, everything. And Serena would go from being a protected wife to being an accomplice. Or worse, a liability someone decided to eliminate. She looked at the time. 11:17 p.m. 43 minutes to make a decision that could get her killed. Her hands were shaking when she typed out a response. I'll be there. Oh. The Pierre Hotel's rooftop garden was closed to the public at midnight, which meant Catalina had either bribed someone or had connections Serena didn't know about. Serena stepped out of the elevator onto the terrace and immediately spotted her. The woman who was supposed to be Damiano's bride. The woman whose disappearance had accidentally made Serena's entire nightmare possible. Catalina Russo was stunning in the way of women who'd been beautiful their entire lives and knew exactly how to weaponize it. Dark hair cascading over her shoulders, designer coat that probably cost more than Serena's old apartment, diamond earrings that caught the city lights and threw them back like shards of glass. She stood by the railing, looking out over Central Park, a champagne flute dangling from her fingers, like she was at a cocktail party instead of a clandestine meeting that could destroy lives. Serena Vaughn, Catalina said without turning around. Or should I call you Mrs. Moretti? I'm never sure about the etiquette in these situations. What do you want? Catalina turned, and up close, Serena could see the calculation in her dark eyes. The intelligence, the absolute lack of fear. I want to help you, Catalina said simply. Bullshit. Fair. Catalina took a sip of champagne, her red lips leaving a perfect print on the glass. Let me rephrase. I want to help you help me, and in the process, we both walk away from this disaster without ending up dead or in federal prison. Serena crossed her arms, trying to project confidence she absolutely didn't feel. You're the one talking to the feds. Why the hell would I trust anything you say? Because I know things about you that Damiano doesn't. Things that could make your little arrangement very complicated if they came to light. The threat was delivered with a smile, which somehow made it worse. What things? Catalina gestured to a small table set up with 2 chairs and a bottle of champagne on ice. Sit. This is going to take a minute. Every instinct screamed at Serena to run, to call Damiano, To press that panic button and let armed men handle this situation instead of walking deeper into whatever trap Catalina was setting. But she sat anyway. Catalina poured champagne into a second glass and slid it across the table. I've been watching you for 2 months, following your movements, listening to conversations. It's amazing what you can learn when you have the right surveillance equipment and enough motivation. Serena's blood turned to ice. You've been stalking me. I've been protecting my interests. Catalina leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs with elegant ease. See, when I disappeared from that wedding, it wasn't because I was scared of Damiano. It was because I was smart. I knew what marrying him would cost me, the violence, the constant danger, the slow erosion of everything that made me human until I was just another pretty accessory in his collection. Then why come back? Because I underestimated how quickly he'd replace me. I thought he'd scramble, thought the wedding would fall apart, and his grandmother would seize control. And in the chaos, I could negotiate a better position, maybe even get him to change the terms of our arrangement. Catalina's smile was bitter. But then you walked into that cathedral like some desperate Cinderella, and he married you before my plane even left the runway. So this is about jealousy. This is about leverage. Catalina leaned forward, her eyes glittering. Do you know what the feds offered me in exchange for testimony? Witness protection. New identity. Enough money to disappear and never look back. All I have to do is tell them everything I know about the Moretti organization's operations. Serena's stomach churned. And what do you know? Enough to put Damiano away for 20 years. Marco, Luca, Vincent, all of them. The construction kickbacks, the union control, the money laundering through the luxury businesses. I was engaged to the head of the family for 5 years. You think I didn't pay attention? So why haven't you? Because I wanted to meet you first. Catalina took another sip of champagne, studying Serena over the rim of her glass. I wanted to see what kind of woman could walk into my life and take my place without even trying. And you know what I found? What? A scared girl playing dress-up. A nobody from Brooklyn who got lucky and married a monster. Catalina's voice went cold. But here's the interesting part. About 3 weeks into your little arrangement, something changed. You started looking at him differently, started touching him differently, and he started looking at you like you were something other than a business transaction. Heat crept up Serena's neck. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Catalina pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and turned it to face Serena. The video showed the penthouse living room. Serena and Damiano 2 weeks ago, sitting on the couch with paperwork spread between them. In the footage, Damiano said something that made Serena laugh, and without thinking, she leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. His arm came around her automatically, his hand settling on her hip with the easy intimacy of people who'd forgotten they were supposed to be pretending. That's not staged, Catalina said quietly. That's not two people playing roles for an audience. That's real. Serena's hands clenched into fists. Where did you get that? I have cameras in the penthouse. 5 of them, to be exact. Installed months ago when I was still engaged to Damiano and wanted insurance in case things went south. Catalina pocketed the phone. I've got hours of footage. You and Damiano having breakfast, talking strategy. Him waiting up for you after events. The night 2 weeks ago when you found him in his study and convinced him to sleep. The way he looks at you when you're not watching. Why are you telling me this? Because that footage is valuable. To me. To the feds. To anyone who wants to prove that your marriage is a fraud designed to circumvent Antonio Moretti's will. Catalina's expression hardened. But it's also valuable to you. Because if I hand it over to federal investigators, they'll use it to dismantle everything. They'll charge you as an accessory. They'll dig into your background, your finances, your mother's medical records, and they'll find out that you've been receiving payments from Damiano's accounts. Thousands of dollars transferred to cover your mother's care. Serena's world tilted. That's not illegal. He's my husband. He's your employer. That's what a contract marriage is, legally speaking. And accepting payment to participate in immigration fraud or wire fraud or conspiracy to commit tax evasion, which is what this will look like to a federal prosecutor, that's very illegal. Catalina's smile was poison. You could go to prison, Serena. Real prison. 5 to 10 years if they decide to make an example of you. The rooftop garden spun. Serena gripped the edge of the table, trying to keep herself anchored to reality. What do you want? I want Damiano to pay me what he would have paid you, $5 million. In exchange, I give you all the surveillance footage, I refuse to cooperate with the feds, and I disappear for real this time. Catalina tilted her head. Or I hand everything over to the investigators tomorrow morning and you both go down in flames. Your choice. That's extortion. That's business. Catalina stood, smoothing down her coat. You have 24 hours to convince Damiano to transfer the money. Once I confirm receipt, I'll give you the hard drives with all the footage. No copies, no backups. Clean break. And if he refuses? Catalina's smile was all teeth. Then I hope you look good in orange. Federal prison jumpsuits aren't very flattering. She turned and walked toward the elevator, her heels clicking against the terrace stone with the confident rhythm of someone who'd already won. Serena sat alone in the cold night air, staring at the champagne glass she hadn't touched, trying to process what had just happened. Catalina had surveillance footage, hours of it, evidence that could destroy everything. And Serena had 24 hours to tell Damiano that the woman he'd replaced was blackmailing them both. She found him at the safe house on 47th Street at 3 in the morning. The building looked abandoned from the outside. Cracked windows, faded signage, the kind of place you'd walk past without a second glance. But inside it was a fortress. Armed guards, reinforced doors, a conference room where Damiano sat with Marco, Luca, and Vincent, their faces grim in the fluorescent light. They all looked up when Serena walked in, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. What the hell are you doing here? Damiano was on his feet immediately, crossing to her with long strides. I told you to stay in the penthouse. We have a problem. Serena's voice came out steadier than she felt. A big one. Bigger than Catalina talking to the feds? She's not talking to them. Not yet. But she will if we don't pay her $5 million in the next 24 hours. Dead silence. Then Marco laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. She's blackmailing us. That's ballsy. I'll give her that. What does she have? Damiano's eyes never left Serena's face, and she could see him calculating, processing, running through scenarios at lightning speed. Surveillance footage from the penthouse. Cameras she installed when you were still engaged. Serena's throat was tight. She's been watching us for 2 months. She has video of us, together, being ourselves instead of playing the part. Understanding dawned in Damiano's expression. Fuck. Yeah. That's evidence of fraud, Vincent said flatly. If she hands that over to federal investigators, they'll use it to unravel everything. The marriage, the inheritance, all of it. Not to mention what it'll do to Serena, Damiano said, his voice dangerously quiet. They'll charge her as an accessory. Conspiracy. Fraud. She could go to prison. Marco leaned back in his chair, studying Serena with new interest. So what did you tell her? That I'd talk to Damiano, that we'd consider her offer. Consider? Marco's eyebrows rose. Seems pretty straightforward to me. We pay her off or we all go down. We don't negotiate with blackmailers, Damiano said flatly. Then what do you suggest? Luca asked. Because if that footage gets out, it won't. Damiano's jaw was set. Catalina made a mistake. She showed her hand to Serena instead of going straight to the feds. That means she wants the money more than she wants revenge. And people who want something badly enough make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? Serena asked quietly. Damiano looked at her, and something in his expression made her stomach clench. The kind that get them killed. No? The word came out before Serena could stop it. You are not killing her. She's a threat to this entire organization. She's a woman who ran because she was smart enough to see the trap before it closed. Serena stepped closer, her hands balling into fists. You're not executing someone for trying to survive. This isn't about morality, Serena. This is about... I don't care. Her voice cracked. I don't care about your empire or your legacy or any of it if it costs someone's life. Find another way. The room went silent. Marco, Luca, and Vincent stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Damiano's expression was unreadable. You're asking me to let her walk away with $5 million and hope she keeps her word about destroying the footage. I'm asking you not to become the monster she thinks you are. I'm already that monster. His voice was quiet, resigned. I've been that monster since I was 8 years old. That's what this world requires. Then maybe it's time to require something different. Damiano stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to his captains. "Give us the room." They filed out without argument, leaving Serena alone with the man she'd accidentally married and somehow started to care about despite every warning sign screaming at her to run. The door clicked shut. "You don't understand what you're asking," Damiano said, quietly. "I understand perfectly. You think killing Catalina solves the problem. But it doesn't. It just creates new ones. The feds will investigate her death. They'll dig deeper. They'll find connections we don't want them to find. This isn't about mercy, Damiano. It's about strategy. And paying her off, that's strategic? It's cleaner." Serena crossed her arms. "Give her the money. Get the footage. Let her disappear. We survive, she survives, and nobody has to die. You're assuming she'll actually destroy the evidence instead of keeping copies for future blackmail. Then we make sure she knows what happens if she doesn't." Damiano's lips twitched. Almost a smile. "You've been paying attention. I've had good teachers." He moved closer and Serena stood her ground, even though her heart was racing. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with unexpected gentleness. "You're trying to save me," he said softly, "from becoming something worse than I already am. I'm trying to save both of us. It might not work. She might take the money and turn us in anyway. I know, but at least we tried something other than violence first." Damiano studied her face for a long moment. Then he dropped his hand and pulled out his phone. "Marco, set up the transfer, $5 million to the account Catalina provides. But I want surveillance on her the second the money clears. If she goes anywhere near a federal building, we move." He ended the call and looked at Serena. "You just saved her life," he said quietly. "I hope to God you're right about this." "Me too," because if she wasn't, they were both going to pay for Serena's mercy with everything they had. The money transferred at noon the next day. Catalina confirmed receipt and provided coordinates for a dead drop, where she'd leave the hard drives with all the surveillance footage. Damiano sent a team to retrieve them, then had his tech specialist verify that the files were genuine and that no copies existed in any cloud storage or backup system. By 6 p.m., they had confirmation. The footage was real, no copies detected. Catalina Russo disappeared that night, chartered a private flight to somewhere in South America, according to Damiano's intelligence network, far enough away that she'd never be a problem again. Serena should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt hollow. She stood in the penthouse living room, staring out at the city, trying to reconcile the person she'd been 2 months ago with the person she was now. The girl from Brooklyn who could barely make rent was gone. In her place was someone who'd just negotiated with a blackmailer and convinced a mafia boss to choose mercy over murder. "Serena." She turned. Damiano stood in the doorway, still wearing the suit from his meetings. His tie loosened, exhaustion written in every line of his body. "It's done," he said. "Catalina's gone. The footage is destroyed. We're clear." "Good. You saved her life today. You know that, right?" Serena nodded slowly. "I know. Marco thinks I'm weak for listening to you. Vincent thinks you're a liability. Even Luca's not sure this was the right call. What do you think?" Damiano crossed to her, and this time when he reached for her, there was no calculation, no strategy, just raw honesty. "I think you're the first person in 20 years who's made me question whether the violence is necessary or just easy." His hands framed her face, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. "I think you're dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with weapons or blackmail." "Dangerous how?" "Because you make me want to be someone different, someone better, and that terrifies me more than any threat I've ever faced." Serena's breath caught. This was it. The moment Elena had warned her about. The point of no return. "Damiano, I'm falling in love with you." The words came out rough, like they'd been torn from somewhere deep. "I don't know when it started. Maybe that first night when you looked at me like I was human instead of a monster. Maybe when you stood up to Isabella without breaking. Maybe it's been building this whole time and I was too stupid to see it. But it's real, Serena. This thing between us stopped being fake somewhere along the way, and I can't pretend anymore." Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might explode. "You said love makes you weak." "It does. You do." His thumb brushed across her lower lip. "But I don't care anymore. I'd rather be weak with you than strong without you." She should have pulled away. Should have remembered that this was temporary, that she had 10 more months to survive before she could collect her money and disappear into a normal life. But when he kissed her, slow and deep and desperate, all of that disappeared. This wasn't the performative kiss from their wedding. This wasn't strategy. This was real. And when Serena kissed him back, she knew she'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. They stumbled toward his bedroom in a tangle of hands and breathless gasps. Suits and dresses hit the floor, skin met skin, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Serena felt like she could breathe. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets that cost more than her old month's rent, Damiano traced patterns on her bare shoulder with gentle fingers. "You know this changes everything," he said quietly. "I know. The contract said 1 year, but if we do this, if we make this real, there's no expiration date, no clean exit strategy. You'd be mine, really mine, and in my world that's dangerous." Serena turned to face him, studying the man who'd accidentally become the center of her universe. "Are you asking me to stay, past the year?" "I'm asking if you'd even consider it." She thought about her old life, the crushing poverty, the endless struggle, the suffocating fear that she'd never be anything more than a girl trying to survive. Then she thought about the past 2 months, the terror and the beauty, the violence and the unexpected tenderness. The way Damiano looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "Ask me again in 10 months, she said softly. "When the year is up, when I've had time to actually choose instead of just survive." Damiano's expression went soft. "That's fair." He pulled her closer, and Serena let herself have this. One night, where she didn't have to think about consequences or contracts or the 1,000 ways this could destroy her. Just the warmth of his body and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat and the dangerous, intoxicating feeling of being wanted. She fell asleep in his arms, safe and terrified in equal measure. And when she woke hours later to the sound of shouting and gunfire, she realized that safety had been an illusion all along. Because enemies don't wait for perfect moments to strike. They wait for the moments when you're vulnerable, when you finally let your guard down, when you've made the fatal mistake of falling in love. Serena woke to the sound of breaking glass and automatic gunfire tearing through the night. Her body reacted before her brain caught up, rolling out of bed, hitting the floor hard enough that her shoulder screamed in protest. Damiano was already moving, naked and lethal, yanking open the nightstand drawer and coming up with a handgun that looked like an extension of his body. "Stay down!" he barked, his voice stripped of everything except command. Another explosion of gunfire, closer this time. The reinforced windows spiderwebbed but held. For now. Serena's heart slammed against her ribs so hard she thought they might crack. "What's happening?" "We're under attack." Damiano pulled on pants with one hand, the gun never wavering from the bedroom door. "Get to the panic room, now." "What about you?" "I said now, Serena." She scrambled to her feet, grabbing the shirt he'd discarded hours ago and pulling it over her bare skin. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely make her fingers work. The fabric smelled like him, cologne and gunpowder and something darker she couldn't name. Damiano crossed to the door, pressed his ear against it, listening. His entire body was coiled tight, every muscle ready to explode into violence. 3 shooters in the main living area, at least 2 more in the hallway. They breached security too easily. Someone gave them access codes. A traitor. Yeah. His jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. And when I find out who, I'm going to tear them apart with my bare hands. More gunfire, shouting in Italian. The distinctive crack of someone returning fire. Probably the security team stationed throughout the building. Damiano looked back at her, and in his eyes she saw something that made her stomach drop. Not fear. Worse. Resignation. Like he'd been expecting this moment his entire life and was almost relieved it had finally arrived. "The panic room is behind the bookshelf in my study," he said. "Biometric lock. It'll read your palm print. I added you to the system 2 weeks ago. Once you're inside, there's a satellite phone. Speed dial 1 connects directly to Marco. Tell him we're under siege and I need backup yesterday. You're not coming with me." "I can't. If I hide while my men are dying out there, I lose everything. They need to see me fight." He moved to her, grabbed her face with his free hand, and kissed her hard enough to bruise. "I will come back to you. I swear to God, Serena, I will come back." "Damiano, go, now." He opened the door and stepped into the hallway. And Serena's last glimpse was of him moving toward the gunfire, like he was walking into Sunday Mass instead of a war zone. Then the door slammed shut, and she was alone. Every instinct screamed at her to follow him, to not let him face whatever nightmare was tearing through the penthouse by himself. But she forced her legs to move toward the study, forced herself to think strategically instead of emotionally. If she died, Damiano would blame himself, would lose focus, would make mistakes that could get him killed. The only way to help him was to survive. She sprinted down the hallway, her bare feet silent on marble floors. The study door was closed. She grabbed the handle, twisted, threw herself inside, and came face to face with Angela Santino. Marco's wife stood by Damiano's desk, a small pistol held with the comfortable grip of someone who'd used weapons before. Her designer dress was pristine, her makeup perfect, her expression cold as January ice. "Hello, Serena," Angela said pleasantly. "We were hoping you'd show up." Serena's blood turned to permafrost. You're the traitor. Traitor is such an ugly word. I prefer strategic opportunist." Angela gestured with the gun toward the leather chair by the desk. "Sit. We're going to wait here while my associates finish eliminating Damiano's security team. Then we're going to have a conversation about the future of the Moretti family." "Marco knows you're doing this?" Something flickered in Angela's expression. Pain, maybe, or rage buried so deep it had fossilized. Marco is a loyal dog who would lick Damiano's boots until the day he died. He had his chance to step up, to take control when Catalina disappeared, but he chose to bow and scrape instead. So I made a different choice. "You're going to kill him." The words tasted like ash. "You're going to kill your own husband. I'm going to kill everyone who stands between me and what I deserve." Angela's voice went hard. "Do you have any idea what it's like? Spending 12 years married to Damiano's second-in-command, watching from the shadows while men half as smart make decisions that affect our lives, being patted on the head and told to look pretty while the real work happens around me. So this is about power. This is about survival." The gun didn't waver. "The Moretti Empire is dying, Serena. Damiano's too soft, too hesitant. He paid off Catalina instead of eliminating her. He married a nobody from Brooklyn instead of forming a strategic alliance. He's making decisions with his heart instead of his head, and that weakness is going to get us all killed or arrested." "You're wrong about him." "Am I? Then why did I just walk into the most secure penthouse in Manhattan with a team of armed mercenaries? Why are his supposedly loyal security guards bleeding out in the hallway? Why is his entire operation falling apart while he's too busy playing house with you to notice?" Each word landed like a physical blow, because underneath the venom, they carried a seed of truth that Serena couldn't ignore. Gunfire erupted somewhere close. Damiano's voice, shouting orders. The wet thud of bodies hitting the floor. Angela's expression tightened. "Sit down before I put a bullet in your knee." Serena sat. Her mind was racing, running through scenarios, looking for exits. The panic room was 15 feet away, hidden behind the bookshelf to her left. If she could get to it, lock herself inside. "Don't even think about it," Angela said, reading her intentions like a book. "I know about the panic room. First thing I'm having my people dismantle once this is over. Can't have safe spaces when you're trying to establish dominance through fear." "You're insane. I'm pragmatic." Angela pulled out her phone with her free hand, typed something one-handed with practiced ease. "I just texted the team leader. Told him to prioritize Damiano over the others. Capture if possible. Kill if necessary." Serena's heart stopped. "No." "Yes. And once he's dead, I'll position Marco as the grief-stricken best friend who reluctantly takes control to prevent a power vacuum. He'll never know I orchestrated it. He'll think it was a rival family. Maybe the Russos, angry about Catalina's exile. Maybe the Costellos, sensing weakness. Doesn't matter. What matters is that in 72 hours, I'll be the power behind the throne, and no one will ever pat me on the head again." The study door exploded inward. Damiano stood in the doorway, blood splattered across his bare chest, the gun in his hand still smoking. His eyes locked onto Angela with such pure, concentrated rage that Serena felt the temperature in the room drop. "Move away from her," he said quietly. "Now." Angela swung her pistol toward Serena's head. "Take one step, and I blow her brains all over your expensive desk." Damiano froze. For the first time since Serena had met him, she saw genuine fear crack through his control. Not fear for himself, fear for her. "This doesn't have to end badly," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "Put down the gun. We'll talk. Figure out what you want." "What I want is your empire." Angela's finger tightened on the trigger. "And the fastest way to get it is to take away the one thing that makes you weak." Everything happened in the space between heartbeats. Damiano's arm came up, his gun tracking toward Angela. Angela's finger completed its squeeze on the trigger. And Serena threw herself sideways with every ounce of strength in her body. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Pain exploded through Serena's left shoulder like liquid fire, spinning her around and slamming her into the desk. She hit the floor hard, her vision whiting out for a second from the shock. Then Damiano's gun fired twice in rapid succession. Angela's body jerked, the pistol falling from suddenly nerveless fingers. She looked down at the spreading red stain on her designer dress with something that might have been surprise. Then her legs gave out, and she crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. Damiano was across the room in 2 strides, dropping to his knees beside Serena. His hands were on her face, her shoulders, checking for damage with the frantic precision of someone who'd seen too many people die. "How bad?" His voice cracked. "Serena, how bad?" She tried to speak but only managed a gasping sob. The pain in her shoulder was overwhelming, radiating down her arm and up her neck in waves that made her want to vomit. Damiano's hands found the wound, pressed down hard. She screamed. "I know, baby. I know. I'm sorry." His face was ashen beneath the blood spatter. "You're going to be okay. You hear me? You're going to be fine." "Damiano," she coughed, tasted copper. "The others, your men." "Fuck my men. You're what matters." He yanked off his belt, wrapped it around her shoulder with brutal efficiency, and pulled it tight enough that black spots danced in her vision. "Stay with me. Don't you dare close your eyes." Footsteps pounded in the hallway. Damiano's gun came up automatically, trained on the door, his body positioned between Serena and whatever threat was coming. Marco burst through, his own gun drawn, his suit jacket torn and blood-stained. He took in the scene. Angela's body, Serena bleeding on the floor, Damiano's murderous expression, and his face went white. "No," Marco breathed. "No, she wouldn't. Your wife just tried to kill mine," Damiano snarled. "She orchestrated this entire attack. Used your name, your reputation, your loyalty as cover while she tried to take my empire." Marco's gun hand dropped. He stared at Angela's corpse like he was looking at a stranger. "I didn't know. Damiano, I swear to God, I didn't know. I believe you, but that doesn't change what she did." Damiano's attention snapped back to Serena, his hands checking her pulse, her breathing. "How many shooters are left?" 3 confirmed dead, 2 escaped through the garage. Marco's voice sounded hollow. "Luca's securing the building. Vincent's calling in our doctor. But Damiano, if she's hit, she took the bullet for me." The words came out broken. She saw Angela aim and she moved. She fucking moved. Serena's vision was starting to blur at the edges. The pain had transformed into a strange, distant thing, like it was happening to someone else. She knew that was bad. Knew it meant shock was setting in. "Damiano," she whispered. He leaned down, his forehead pressing against hers. "I'm here. I'm right here." The panic room. Satellite phone. Speed dial 1. "Already called Marco. Backup's coming." "No." She grabbed his wrist with her good hand, held on with what little strength she had left. "Not backup. Ambulance. I need real doctors. Hospital. Hospitals mean questions. Police. Federal investigators. Don't care." Her grip tightened. Rather be alive in prison than dead and free. Something in his expression shattered. Okay, baby. Hospital. Whatever you need." He looked up at Marco. "Call 911. Tell them we have a gunshot victim. Critical condition. Then get the fuck out before they arrive. Take Angela's body with you. This can't touch you." Marco hesitated. "Damiano, that's an order. Your wife tried to kill us both. I don't blame you, but I need you clear of this mess. Can you do that for me?" Marco's jaw worked. Then he nodded and pulled out his phone. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Damiano kept pressure on Serena's shoulder. kept talking to her in a low, steady stream of words she couldn't quite process, but that sounded like promises and prayers mixed together. Stay with me. That's all you have to do. Just stay with me. Trying. Her voice came out thready. Damiano, if I don't you fucking dare finish that sentence. If I don't make it, you're going to make it. You're not allowed to leave me. I just found you, Serena. I just figured out that you're the only thing in this entire godforsaken world that actually matters. So you're going to stay alive, and we're going to get through this, and then I'm going to marry you again. For real this time. No contracts, no arrangements. Just you and me choosing each other. Tears tracked down his face, cutting clean lines through the blood and gunpowder residue. I love you, he said. I love you so fucking much it terrifies me, so you don't get to die. That's not how this ends. Serena tried to smile, tried to tell him she loved him too, but the darkness was creeping in at the edges of her vision, pulling her down into something soft and silent. The last thing she heard was Damiano screaming her name. She woke to the smell of antiseptic and the steady beep of medical equipment. The hospital room was private, expensive, the kind of place where rich people went to have their emergencies handled discreetly. Serena's shoulder was wrapped in pristine white bandages, her arm in a sling, an IV drip feeding clear liquid into her veins. Damiano sat in a chair pulled up beside her bed, his head resting on his crossed arms on the mattress. He was still wearing the blood-stained pants from the attack, but someone had given him a clean shirt. His hair was a mess. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Hey, Serena croaked. His head snapped up, and the relief that flooded his face was so raw it made her chest ache. You're awake. He grabbed her good hand, brought it to his lips, kissed her knuckles with desperate gentleness. Thank God. They said you'd be fine, but I needed to see your eyes open. Needed to know you were really okay. How long? 18 hours. They had to do surgery to remove the bullet and repair some tissue damage. The doctor said you were lucky. Another 2 inches to the right, and it would have hit your subclavian artery. You would have bled out before the ambulance arrived. Serena processed that. 2 inches, the difference between life and death measured in the space of a heartbeat. Angela? Dead? Marco took her body and made it disappear. As far as the hospital knows, you were the victim of a home invasion, random violence. Nothing to do with organized crime. Damiano's expression hardened. The police came by to take a statement. I told them you were unconscious and would speak with them when you recovered. Bought us some time to get our story straight. And the feds? Haven't shown up yet, but they will. An attack this brazen, this well-coordinated. They'll want to know who funded it and why. Serena's head was starting to throb. What happens now? Now we figure out who else was working with Angela. Someone gave her access to mercenaries. Someone helped her plan this. And I find them. And I make them wish they'd never been born. His voice was ice wrapped in razors. But first you heal. Everything else is secondary. Damiano. She squeezed his hand. You can't keep protecting me like I'm made of glass. I chose this. I chose you. That means accepting all of it, including the danger. You took a bullet for me. Yeah, I did. Why? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with everything they'd been dancing around for months. Because somewhere between the fake marriage and the real feelings, you became the person I couldn't imagine losing, Serena said quietly. Because when I saw that gun pointed at you, nothing else mattered except keeping you alive. Because I love you, you idiot. And love makes you do stupid, reckless things like throwing yourself in front of bullets. Damiano's eyes were bright with unshed tears. That's the stupidest, most beautiful thing anyone's ever done for me. Yeah, well, don't get used to it. Once per lifetime limit on taking bullets for Mafia bosses. He laughed, but it came out choked. Deal. A knock at the door made them both tense. Damiano's hand moved automatically toward where his gun would be if he was wearing his jacket. Marco stepped inside, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. His eyes were red-rimmed, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. He closed the door carefully behind him. How is she? He asked quietly. Alive, healing. Damiano's tone was neutral, careful. What do you need? To explain, to apologize, to... Marco's voice cracked. Angela was my wife, my partner. I should have seen what she was planning. Should have noticed the signs. You loved her. Love makes us blind. That's not an excuse. Marco moved closer, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. She betrayed you, betrayed the family, put Serena in the hospital, and I brought her into our lives. That blood is on my hands. No, Serena said before Damiano could respond. The blood is on Angela's hands. You didn't know. You didn't help her. You're not responsible for her choices. Marco looked at her with something that might have been gratitude. You're too kind. I'm practical. Losing you because of Angela's betrayal would be letting her win, and I don't like losing. A ghost of a smile touched Marco's lips, then it disappeared, replaced by grim determination. I found out who helped her. Took me all night, but I tracked down the financial transfers, the communications. It wasn't just Angela acting alone. Damiano went very still. Who? Isabella. The name dropped like a bomb. Serena's stomach clenched. Your grandmother? My grandmother has been planning a coup since the day I married you, Marco said flatly. Angela was just the weapon she chose. Isabella funded the mercenaries, provided the security codes, orchestrated the entire attack. She wanted Damiano dead and the empire fractured so she could rebuild it under her control. Damiano's face had gone to stone. You have proof? Bank transfers, encrypted messages. Angela kept records as insurance. I found them on her laptop. Marco pulled out a flash drive, set it on the bedside table. It's all here. Everything you need to know that your own grandmother tried to have you killed. Silence filled the room like floodwater. Serena watched Damiano process the information. Saw the moment it hit him, the betrayal cutting deeper than any bullet could. His hand tightened on hers until she thought her bones might crack, then released as he fought for control. Where is she now? His voice was eerily calm. The estate in Westchester. She's been there since the attack, waiting to hear if her plan succeeded. Good. Damiano stood, and when he looked at Marco, his expression could have frozen hell. Call Luca and Vincent. Tell them to meet me at the estate in 2 hours. Full contingent, armed and ready. Damiano, she tried to kill my wife. She tried to destroy everything my grandfather built. She betrayed her own blood because she couldn't accept that I chose my own path. His hands were shaking with barely controlled rage. I'm going to give her one chance to explain herself. One chance to justify why I shouldn't end her right there. And then I'm going to do what needs to be done. Serena struggled to sit up, ignoring the scream of pain from her shoulder. Wait, don't go there angry. Don't make decisions you can't take back. This decision was made the moment she put a target on you. Then let me come with you. Absolutely not. You're injured. I'm also your wife. The person she tried to kill. I have a right to be there when you confront her. Serena met his eyes, held his gaze with iron will. Besides, you need me. You go in there alone, full of rage, and you'll do something you regret. But if I'm there, you'll have to think before you act. You'll have to be strategic instead of emotional. Damiano stared at her like she'd lost her mind. You can barely stand. Then you'll help me. But I'm coming. She looked at Marco. Tell the doctor I'm checking out against medical advice, and someone find me clothes that aren't covered in my own blood. Marco glanced between them, then nodded slowly. I'll handle it. He left, and Damiano turned back to Serena with murder and admiration warring in his expression. You're going to get yourself killed one of these days. Probably, but not today. She held out her good hand. Help me up. We have a grandmother to confront. The estate looked like something out of a Gothic novel. 3 stories of old money and older secrets, surrounded by manicured gardens that had probably witnessed more than their share of violence over the decades. Armed men flanked the entrance, Damiano's soldiers, not Isabella's, and they nodded grimly as the convoy of black SUVs pulled up the circular drive. Serena sat beside Damiano in the back seat, her shoulders screaming despite the painkillers the doctor had reluctantly provided before she'd signed herself out of the hospital. She'd changed into dark jeans and a loose black sweater that hid the bandages. She looked pale, felt worse, but she'd be damned if she'd let anyone see weakness right now. Last chance to stay in the car, Damiano said quietly. Not happening. He helped her out with careful hands, his arms supporting her weight as they walked toward the entrance. Marco, Luca, and Vincent fell into formation behind them, a show of unified force. Inside, the estate was all dark wood and expensive antiques, A maid appeared, took one look at Damiano's expression, and fled without a word. They found Isabella in the solarium, taking afternoon tea like she hadn't just orchestrated a massacre. She looked up as they entered, and if she was surprised or afraid, her face didn't show it. "Damiano, how lovely. I wasn't expecting visitors." Her eyes slid to Serena, took in the sling and the pallor with clinical assessment. "And your resilient little wife. Still alive, I see. What a disappointment." The words were delivered with such casual cruelty that Serena felt Marco tense beside her. Damiano crossed the room with measured steps. "You tried to have me killed. I tried to save this family from your weakness." Isabella set down her teacup with precise care. "You're soft, Damiano. Too much of your mother in you, not enough of your grandfather. I watched you pay off that Russo girl instead of eliminating her. Watched you fall in love with a nobody like some pathetic romantic. You've made this organization vulnerable, and vulnerability gets people killed. So you decided to kill me first. I decided to do what was necessary, what your grandfather would have done." Her dark eyes were chips of flint. "He built this empire on strength and fear. You're trying to rebuild it on mercy and love. That's not leadership. That's suicide." And Angela, what was she? A useful tool, ambitious, bitter, easy to manipulate. Isabella's expression didn't change. She wanted power. I gave her the means to take it. The fact that she failed is unfortunate but not catastrophic. There are always more tools available. Damiano's hands clenched into fists. "You're my blood, my family, and you're destroying everything our family stands for." Isabella stood, and despite her age, despite her small stature, she commanded the room like a general. "So yes, I made my choice. I chose the empire over you, the legacy over sentiment, and I'd do it again." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Damiano pulled his gun. Serena's heart stopped. This was it, the point where everything either shattered completely or somehow, impossibly, found a way forward. "Damiano, don't," she said quietly. He didn't look at her. His entire focus was on Isabella, the gun trained on her heart with rock-steady hands. "Give me one reason," he said, his voice stripped to bone, "why I shouldn't end you right here." Isabella smiled. It was cold, proud, utterly fearless. "Because you're my grandson. Because despite everything, you still have enough of your grandfather in you to understand that sometimes the hard choice is the right choice. Because if you kill me, you prove that I was wrong about your weakness." She tilted her head. "Or maybe you'll do it anyway. Maybe you'll prove that you have the strength to put family loyalty aside when it conflicts with survival. Either way, you'll know exactly what kind of man you are." The gun didn't waver. Serena stepped forward, ignoring the pain that lanced through her shoulder with the movement. She placed her good hand on Damiano's arm, felt the tension vibrating through him like a live wire. "She wants you to kill her," Serena said quietly. "Can't you see? If you pull that trigger, she wins. She gets to die a martyr instead of living with the consequences of her failure. She gets to go out believing she was right about you all along. She tried to kill you, and she failed. I'm alive, you're alive, the empire is still standing." Serena's fingers tightened on his arm. "But if you kill her, you become exactly what she thinks you are. A man who chooses violence over strategy, who lets rage make his decisions instead of logic." Damiano's jaw worked. The gun trembled almost imperceptibly. "What would you have me do? Let her walk away? No. Make her live with what she's done, strip her of power, remove her from the organization completely. Send her somewhere isolated where she can't hurt anyone else. Let her spend the rest of her days knowing that she bet everything on your weakness and lost." Serena stepped closer, her voice dropping to something only he could hear. "You told me once that love makes you weak. Prove her wrong. Show her that love made you strong enough to choose mercy when violence would have been easier." The moment stretched like taffy, pulling thin and dangerous. Then Damiano lowered the gun. Isabella's expression flickered, just for a second. Disappointment, maybe, or grudging respect. "Marco," Damiano said, his voice carefully controlled. "Take her to the house in Montana, isolated, secure. She's under house arrest until I decide what to do with her permanently." "Yes, boss." "And Isabella?" Damiano turned back to his grandmother, and his eyes were ice. You're right that grandfather built this empire on fear, but he also built it on loyalty, on the understanding that family protects family. You broke that. You chose your vision over your blood. So here's my choice. You're no longer part of this family, no longer part of this empire. You're nothing, just an old woman who forgot that evolution beats tradition every single time. He holstered his gun and turned his back on her. The ultimate dismissal. Come on, he said to Serena. We're done here. They walked out together, leaving Isabella standing in her solarium surrounded by the wreckage of her failed coup, and Serena knew they'd just crossed a threshold there was no coming back from. The war wasn't over. But they'd survived the first battle, and sometimes survival was victory enough. The war didn't end with Isabella's exile. It metastasized into something uglier, more insidious, a slow-burning conflict that played out in boardrooms and back alleys, in wire transfers and whispered conversations, in the careful dismantling of everything Angela and Isabella had built in the shadows. Serena spent 3 weeks recovering in the penthouse, while Damiano waged a calculated campaign to root out every trace of the conspiracy. Marco led the investigation with the grim determination of a man trying to wash his wife's blood off his hands. They found financial records linking 6 mid-level soldiers to the coup attempt. Damiano dealt with each one personally, and Serena learned not to ask what dealt with meant when he came home at 3 a.m. with bruised knuckles and empty eyes. The feds circled like sharks, scenting blood in the water. 2 FBI agents showed up at the hospital 3 days after Serena was shot, asking polite questions with sharp edges. She stuck to the script Damiano had prepared. Home invasion, random violence. She didn't see the shooter's face clearly enough to identify them. The agents didn't believe her. She could see it in their eyes. But without evidence or a cooperative witness, they had nothing to move forward with. Catalina stayed disappeared. Marco's people confirmed she was living in Buenos Aires under a new name, far enough away that she'd never be a problem again. The 5 million had bought her silence and her distance, exactly as Serena had gambled it would. The organization stabilized slowly, like a broken bone knitting back together. Damaged but functional, changed but surviving. And through it all, Serena and Damiano circled each other with the careful wariness of 2 people who'd seen too much, survived too much, and didn't quite know how to be normal anymore. 6 weeks after the attack, Serena woke to find Damiano already gone. She'd gotten used to that. He slept less these days, working 18-hour days to rebuild what Isabella and Angela had tried to tear down. When he did sleep, it was fitful, plagued by nightmares that had him jerking awake with her name on his lips and panic in his eyes. She found a note on his pillow, written in his sharp handwriting. Breakfast at Rossi's. Meet me at 9. Wear something nice. Rossi's was the Italian restaurant in Brooklyn where Serena used to wait tables. The place she'd worked weekends while juggling 2 other jobs and drowning in bills. She hadn't been back since the wedding, hadn't even thought about her old life except in fragments, memories that felt like they belonged to someone else. She dressed carefully. The emerald dress Elena had picked out months ago for that first dinner with the captains. Her shoulder had healed enough that she could move without the sling, though it still ached when the weather changed. The scar would be permanent, a puckered reminder of the moment she'd chosen Damiano's life over her own safety. She didn't mind it. Some lessons were worth keeping. The drive to Brooklyn felt like traveling backward through time. Serena sat in the back of the armored SUV with 2 bodyguards she'd stopped noticing weeks ago, watching the neighborhoods change from Manhattan's gleaming towers to Brooklyn's gritty streets. The city looked different now. Not better or worse, just different, seen through eyes that had witnessed things she could never unsee. Rossi's hadn't changed. Same red awning, same cracked sidewalk out front, same smell of garlic and tomato sauce that hit her the moment she walked through the door. Damiano sat at a corner table, wearing a suit that cost more than the restaurant probably made in a month. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression made her chest tighten. Not the controlled mask he wore for business. Something rawer, more vulnerable. "You came," he said, standing as she approached. "You asked. I wasn't sure you would, after everything." Serena slid into the seat across from him, studying his face. He looked tired, older than his 33 years, like he'd been carrying the weight of the world and was finally starting to buckle under it. "Why here?" she asked quietly. "Because this is where you came from, who you were before I dragged you into my nightmare." Damiano's hands were on the table, fingers laced together. No rings except the platinum wedding band that matched hers. I wanted to see you in your world instead of mine. Wanted to remember that you had a life before me. A good life, maybe. Simpler, at least. My life before you was 3 jobs and crushing debt and watching my mother die slowly because I couldn't afford better care. But it was yours. You chose it. You built it yourself. His eyes held hers with painful intensity. I took that choice away. Forced you into a marriage you didn't want, into a world that nearly killed you. And I need to know if you can ever forgive me for that. The question hung in the air between them like smoke. A waiter appeared. Jimmy, one of Serena's old co-workers, who did a double take when he recognized her. Serena? Holy shit, is that you? Hey, Jimmy. Man, we heard you got some fancy new job and disappeared. You look incredible. His eyes slid to Damiano, taking in the expensive suit, the cold authority radiating off him like heat shimmer. This your, boyfriend? Husband, Damiano said flatly. Jimmy's eyebrows shot up. Damn. Congrats. I'll give you guys a minute to look at menus. He fled, and Serena almost smiled at the awkwardness of it. You didn't answer my question, Damiano said once they were alone again. Because it's the wrong question. Serena leaned forward, her good hand covering his. You're asking if I forgive you for the wedding, for pulling me into your world. But Damiano, you saved my life that day. I put a target on your back. You gave me a way out of drowning. Yes, it came with danger. Yes, it cost me things I can never get back. But it also gave me things I never thought I'd have. Financial security, the ability to get my mother real medical care, a purpose beyond just surviving day to day. She squeezed his hand. And somewhere in all the chaos and violence, it gave me you. So no, I don't forgive you because there's nothing to forgive. Something in his expression cracked. You took a bullet for me because I love you. That's insane. Probably. But it's true. Serena's thumb traced the scar across his knuckles, a newer one, earned during the purge of Isabella's co-conspirators. You keep waiting for me to wake up and realize I made a mistake, that I should run while I still can. But I'm not running, Damiano. I'm choosing this, choosing you, messy and dangerous and completely fucking terrifying as it is. His hands turned over, gripping hers with desperate strength. The contract expires in 4 months. I know. You could walk away, take the $5 million, disappear, build a new life somewhere safe. I'd make sure you were protected. Set you up with a new identity, security, everything you'd need to never look back. Is that what you want? I want you safe. I want you alive. I want you as far away from the violence and the fear as possible. His voice cracked. But I also want you to stay. Want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. Want to build something real with you, not just survive together. And those two things can't coexist, Serena. If you stay, you'll always be in danger, always be a target. I can't protect you from that, no matter how hard I try. Then don't protect me. Partner with me instead. He stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. I'm not some fragile thing that needs to be locked in a tower, Serena continued. I'm the woman who walked down an aisle to marry a stranger because survival mattered more than pride, who learned your world's rules and played the game well enough to earn respect from people who wanted me gone, who took a bullet and lived to tell about it. Stop trying to save me from your life and let me choose to be part of it. You don't know what you're asking. I know exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking you to trust me, to see me as an equal instead of a liability, to let me stand beside you instead of behind you. She leaned closer. The contract was always bullshit, Damiano. We both know it. This stopped being a business arrangement months ago, so stop hiding behind it and tell me what you really want. The words hung between them, brutal in their honesty. Damiano closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. I want to marry you again, he said quietly. For real this time. No contracts, no arrangements, no expiration dates. Just you and me choosing each other every single day, knowing exactly what we're getting into. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I want to give you this and know that when you say yes, it's because you want to, not because you're trapped. He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Not the massive diamond from their first wedding, something smaller, more personal. A platinum band with a single emerald, The exact color of the dress she'd worn the night they'd first admitted this thing between them was real. "It's beautiful," Serena whispered. "It's a choice." Damiano took the ring out, held it between them. "Marry me again, Serena. Not because you need money or security or protection. Marry me because when you look at all the terrible, violent, complicated parts of my life and all the ways it could destroy you, you still choose to stay." Serena looked at the ring, at the man offering it, at the future spreading out before them like a battlefield they'd have to cross together. She thought about the girl she'd been 6 months ago, desperate, broke, drowning. That girl would have run screaming from this moment, would have taken the 5 million and disappeared into a safe, quiet life where nobody shot at her and love didn't come with a body count. But that girl was gone, replaced by someone harder, stronger, more alive than she'd ever been, waiting tables and counting pennies. "Yes," she said. Damiano's hands shook as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, settling next to the platinum band from their first wedding, like they'd been designed to go together all along. Then he kissed her across the scarred table in her old restaurant, and it tasted like coming home and jumping off a cliff at the same time. But they held the second wedding 3 months later. Not in a cathedral with hundreds of dangerous strangers watching. Not as a strategic performance designed to save an inheritance. Just a small ceremony in a private garden overlooking the Hudson River, with the people who actually mattered bearing witness. Marco stood as Damiano's best man, the grief of losing Angela still etched into his face, but tempered by time and the hard work of rebuilding trust. Luca and Vincent attended with their wives, all of them having made peace with Serena's permanent presence in ways that felt earned instead of obligated. Elena was there, her professional mask dropped for once, genuine warmth in her eyes as she helped Serena into a dress that was elegant without being ostentatious, simple silk and champagne with sleeves that covered the scar on her shoulder. Serena's mother attended in a wheelchair, her illness held at bay by treatments Damiano's money had finally made accessible. She cried through the entire ceremony, and afterwards she pulled Serena aside with shaking hands. "Are you happy, baby?" her mother asked, her voice weak but urgent. "Really happy? Or are you just making the best of a bad situation?" Serena looked across the garden at Damiano, who was deep in conversation with Marco about something that probably involved logistics and contingency plans, because he couldn't turn off the strategist even at his own wedding. "I'm terrified," Serena admitted. "Every single day I wake up scared that this will be the day everything falls apart. That someone will come after him, after us, and this time we won't survive it." "That's not an answer." "Yes, Mom. I'm happy. Scared and happy in equal measure, because he's worth the fear. This life we're building is worth the danger, and I'd rather have 1 year of this real, messy, dangerous love than 50 years of safe, comfortable nothing." Her mother's eyes searched her face. Then she nodded slowly. "Your father would have had a heart attack if he'd lived to see this. His daughter married to a—" She trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the sentence. "To a man who loves me enough to change, who's trying to build something better than what he inherited." Serena squeezed her mother's frail hands. "I know it's not normal. I know it's not what you dreamed for me. But it's mine, and I chose it." "Then that's all that matters." Her mother pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Just promise me you'll be careful, that you'll protect yourself even when you're busy protecting him." "I promise." The ceremony itself was brief. No priest, just a judge who owed Damiano a favor and didn't ask uncomfortable questions. The vows were simple, stripped of all the traditional language about honor and obedience, replaced with honesty that made Serena's chest ache. "I promise to choose you," Damiano said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Every day, in every situation, even when it would be easier or safer to walk away. I promise to trust your strength instead of fearing it. To see you as my equal, my partner, the person who makes me want to be better than the monster I was raised to become." He paused, his hands gripping hers. "And I promise that if this life ever becomes too much, if you ever want out, I'll let you go. No questions, no guilt. Just love and the understanding that sometimes love means releasing instead of holding on." Serena blinked back tears. "I promise to stand beside you. Not behind you, not in front of you, but beside you as we face whatever comes next. I promise to call you on your bullshit when you're being too ruthless and to support your decisions even when I disagree with them. I promise to be honest about my fear instead of pretending to be braver than I am." She took a shaky breath. "And I promise that no matter how hard this gets, I won't run, because we're in this together now, and together is the only way we survive." The judge pronounced them married, and when Damiano kissed her this time, it felt like a beginning instead of an ending. The reception was small, intimate, wine and food and conversation that stayed carefully away from business. For one night, they were just people celebrating love instead of soldiers planning the next battle. Serena found herself on the terrace overlooking the river as the sun set, painting the water in shades of copper and gold. The city sprawled in the distance, Manhattan's towers glowing like embers. Marco joined her, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. He offered one, and they stood in comfortable silence for a moment. "Angela would have hated this," he said finally. "Too simple, not enough spectacle." "I'm sorry. About what happened? About her." "Don't be. She made her choices. I made mine." Marco took a long drink. "I loved her, still do probably, but that doesn't mean I didn't see her flaws. The ambition, the resentment, the way she looked at power like it was the only thing that mattered." "Do you blame Damiano for killing her?" "I blame her for forcing him to make that choice, for putting herself between a mafia boss and the woman he loves." Marco's expression was bleak. "If she'd lived, she would have tried again. Would have kept coming until one of you was dead. Damiano did what was necessary, and I'll live with that for the rest of my life." "You're a good man, Marco. Better than this world deserves." "We're all doing the best we can with the hands we were dealt." He raised his glass. "To new beginnings, and to hoping they turn out better than the old ones." They drank, and Serena felt the weight of all the violence and betrayal settle a little lighter on her shoulders. When she returned inside, Damiano was waiting. He pulled her into a slow dance even though there was no music, just the distant sound of the city humming beyond the windows. "What are you thinking?" she asked, her head resting on his shoulder. "That I don't deserve you, that I'm the luckiest bastard alive, that I'm terrified of the day this all catches up with us." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "And that despite all of that, I've never been happier." "Same." They swayed together in the quiet, and for just a moment, the future felt manageable instead of terrifying. The federal investigation stalled 3 months after the wedding. Without Catalina's testimony and with Angela dead, the prosecutors couldn't build a strong enough case to move forward with charges. They kept Damiano under surveillance, hoping he'd make a mistake, but he'd learned long ago how to operate in the gray spaces between legal and illegal. The organization evolved. Damiano pushed harder into legitimate businesses, distancing the family from the bloodiest operations. It wasn't a clean break. You didn't walk away from decades of criminal enterprise overnight, but it was movement in the right direction. Serena took an active role in managing the legitimate side. Event planning, luxury hospitality, real estate development. She had a talent for it, discovered, and the wives who'd once looked at her with suspicion started viewing her with grudging respect. Isabella lived out her exile in Montana, alone except for a rotating security detail and the ghosts of her failed coup. Damiano never spoke about her, never visited. She'd chosen to betray him, and he'd chosen to let her live with that choice in isolation. It was mercy and punishment wrapped together, and somehow that felt more fitting than a bullet would have been. Life normalized in the way that life does when you accept that normal is a relative term. There were still threats, still dangers, still nights when Damiano came home with blood on his hands and shadows in his eyes. But there were also mornings drinking coffee on the terrace, lazy Sundays reading the paper, quiet evenings where they argued about nothing and laughed about everything. 1 year to the day after their second wedding, Serena stood in the penthouse bathroom staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the plastic stick. This wasn't planned, wasn't even discussed beyond vague someday conversations. But there it was, staring back at her with the weight of 1,000 new possibilities and terrors. She found Damiano in his study, reviewing quarterly reports for the luxury hotel chain they'd acquired 6 months ago. He looked up when she entered, and whatever he saw in her expression made him set down his pen immediately. "What's wrong?" Serena crossed to him, held out the pregnancy test without a word. He stared at it for a long moment. Then his eyes lifted to hers, and she saw a dozen emotions flash across his face too quickly to name. Are you? His voice cracked. Is this real? As real as everything else in our completely insane life. How do you feel about it? Terrified, excited, completely unprepared. She sank into the chair across from his desk. This world we live in, Damiano, the violence, the danger. Is it fair to bring a child into this? No. He said it without hesitation. Nothing about this life is fair. Nothing about it is safe or normal or anything a parent should want for their kid. Then maybe, but I want it anyway. He came around the desk, knelt in front of her chair, his hands covering hers. I want this baby. Want to build a family with you. Want to try to be the kind of father my old man never was and my grandfather would have despised. His eyes were bright. And I want to believe that we can give this kid something better than what we inherited. Not perfect, not safe, but real, honest, built on love instead of obligation. Serena felt tears slip down her cheeks. What if we fail? What if we can't protect them? Then we fail trying. But we don't run from this, Serena. We face it head on like we've faced everything else. He pressed his forehead to hers. Say yes. Say you want this too, even if it's terrifying. Yes, she whispered. God help us both, yes. They held each other on the floor of his study, surrounded by the trappings of power and violence, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, Serena felt like they were building something that mattered more than survival. They were building a future. 7 months later, Serena gave birth to a daughter at 3 a.m. in the same hospital where she'd been treated for the gunshot wound. The delivery was complicated, 36 hours of labor that left her exhausted and Damiano looking like he'd aged 10 years. But when the doctor finally placed their daughter in Serena's arms, all of that disappeared. She was perfect, tiny and furious, with a full head of dark hair and gray eyes that would probably change color, but for now looked exactly like her father's. What do we call her? Damiano asked, his finger traced gently across their daughter's tiny hand. She gripped it with surprising strength, and his expression went soft in a way Serena had never seen before. Sophia, Serena said. The name had come to her during one of the endless hours of labor. It means wisdom, and God knows she's going to need it to survive us as parents. Sophia Moretti. Damiano tested the name, then smiled. Yeah, that's perfect. He leaned down and kissed Serena's forehead with infinite gentleness. Thank you for this, for choosing me, for building this life even when it would have been easier to run. Thank you for being worth staying for. They brought Sophia home 2 days later to a penthouse that had been transformed. The hard edges softened with baby furniture. Armed security trained in child protection. An entire floor converted into a nursery that looked like something from a magazine. Marco, Luca, and Vincent came to visit, bearing gifts and awkward congratulations. They stood around the baby like soldiers receiving orders, unsure how to reconcile the softness of a newborn with the violence of their world. She's going to have the best protection in the city, Marco said, peering down at Sophia with uncharacteristic tenderness. Anyone even looks at her wrong, they'll disappear. That's either reassuring or horrifying, Serena said. I'm not sure which. Both. It's always both in this life. Elena arrived with a mountain of designer baby clothes and actual tears in her eyes. She's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And Serena, you're glowing. Exhausted, but glowing. That's the sleep deprivation talking. They settled into a new routine. Sleepless nights and early mornings. Diaper changes and feeding schedules. Damiano discovering he could soothe Sophia's crying by walking her around the penthouse while humming off-key Italian lullabies his grandmother had sung to him before she'd tried to have him killed. 3 months in, Serena woke at 2 a.m. to feed Sophia and found Damiano already in the nursery, standing by the crib with his hand resting gently on their daughter's back as she slept. Can't sleep? Serena asked quietly from the doorway. Just watching her breathe. He didn't look away from Sophia, making sure she's real, that this is real. It's real. I keep thinking about my grandfather, about the empire he built and the cost it demanded, the violence, the fear, the way it ate pieces of everyone who touched it until there was nothing left but survival instinct and paranoia. His voice was soft, pained. And I look at her, and I think about what kind of world I'm leaving her. What kind of legacy? Serena crossed to him, sliding her arm around his waist. Then change it. You've already started, pushing into legitimate businesses, distancing from the worst operations. Keep going. Make the empire into something she can be proud of instead of something she has to survive. That could take decades, maybe longer. Then we'd better get started. He looked at her then, and in his eyes she saw the man she'd accidentally married, ruthless and strategic and capable of terrible things, alongside the man he was trying to become. Father. Husband. Someone who could build instead of just destroy. I love you, he said quietly. I don't say it enough, but I do. More than I thought I was capable of loving anything. I know, I love you too. Even when you're impossible. Even when this life scares me so badly I can't breathe. Even when... Sophia made a small noise in her sleep, and they both froze, waiting to see if she'd wake. When she settled back into silence, they released identical breaths. We're going to mess this up, Serena whispered. Screw up as parents. Make mistakes that therapists will spend years unpacking. Probably. But we'll mess it up together. And we'll do our best to protect her while still teaching her to be strong enough to protect herself. Damiano's hand found hers. That's all we can do. Try. And hope it's enough. They stood in the nursery watching their daughter sleep, and Serena thought about the girl she'd been 18 months ago. Running through the rain to a job interview that never existed, desperate and broke and completely alone. That girl wouldn't recognize the woman she'd become. Wife. Mother. Partner to a man trying to redeem a legacy built on blood. But she wouldn't trade it, wouldn't change a single terrifying, beautiful, impossible moment. Because sometimes the wrong cathedral at the wrong time leads you exactly where you need to be. 5 years later. Sophia ran through the penthouse with the fearless energy of a child who'd never known poverty or hunger, her dark curls bouncing with each step. She clutched a stuffed lion Damiano had bought her on their last trip to the zoo, chattering in a mix of English and Italian that she'd picked up from the household staff. Serena watched from the kitchen, coffee in hand, still marveling at how normal this felt, how the impossible had become routine. The empire had transformed significantly in those 5 years. Damiano had sold off the most violent operations, investing instead in real estate, luxury hospitality, and tech startups that actually turned legitimate profits. There were still shadows. You couldn't erase 40 years of criminal enterprise overnight, but the future was cleaner than the past. Isabella had died 2 years ago in Montana, alone except for the nurse who found her. Damiano hadn't attended the funeral, hadn't sent flowers, just a brief nod when Marco delivered the news, and then back to work as if nothing had happened. Serena understood. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness, even after death. Marco had remarried, a quiet woman named Claire who worked as a librarian and had no idea what his real job entailed. Or maybe she knew and chose not to look too closely. Either way, they seemed happy in the careful way of people rebuilding after tragedy. Luca and Vincent remained loyal soldiers, though both had started talking about retirement, about getting out before age or violence claimed them. Damiano was helping them plan exits that would leave them financially secure and still breathing. The federal investigation had gone cold 3 years ago, the prosecutors finally admitting defeat. Damiano Moretti had transformed from mob boss to respected businessman so gradually that nobody could pinpoint exactly when the transition happened. Elena had become Sophia's godmother and Serena's closest friend, the professional distance between them eroded by years of shared crises and quiet victories. And Serena had found her own path. She ran the legitimate side of the Moretti empire now, overseeing a portfolio of businesses that employed hundreds and generated millions in clean revenue. She attended charity galas not as decoration, but as a philanthropist in her own right, building foundations that help people like her mother afford medical care. The girl from Brooklyn who'd waited tables was gone. In her place was a woman who'd learned to navigate boardrooms and underground meetings with equal skill, who could charm investors during the day and stand unflinching beside her husband during the night when old enemies tested their resolve. "Mama!" Sophia crashed into her legs, wrapping small arms around her knees. "Papa says we're going to the park. Can we get ice cream? Did Papa finish his work?" "He said he's done for the day. Said family time is more important than phone calls." Serena smiled. That was new. A year ago, Damiano would have worked through weekends without looking up, but fatherhood had changed him in ways she was still discovering. She found him in his study, closing his laptop with the decisive click of someone actually logging off instead of just switching tasks. "Ice cream, huh?" she said from the doorway. "She's got me wrapped around her finger and she knows it." He stood, rolled his shoulders. "But yeah, family day, no phones, no work, just us and Sophia and whatever trouble she can find in Central Park. You're going soft. I'm getting smart, figured out what actually matters." He crossed to her, pulled her close. "Took me long enough, but I got there eventually." They collected Sophia and headed out, a small army of discreet security trailing at a distance. The park was crowded with families enjoying the spring weather, and for a few hours they were just another family among thousands. Sophia played on the swings, demanding to go higher, higher, laughing with pure joy. Damiano pushed her with careful strength, his expensive suit looking hilariously out of place on the playground, but his smile genuine. Serena sat on a nearby bench watching them and thought about how far they'd come. The violence and terror of those first months felt distant now, like a story that had happened to someone else. But the scars remained, physical and psychological. Reminders that safety was always temporary and peace was something you fought for daily. "Mama, look," Sophia called out. "I'm flying! I see you, baby. Be careful." Damiano caught Serena's eye over Sophia's head, and in that shared glance was everything they'd survived, and everything they still protected. The love that had started as survival and transformed into something real enough to build a life on. Later, after ice cream and an exhausting circuit of the playground, they walked home as the sun set over Manhattan. Sophia rode on Damiano's shoulders, her lion clutched in one hand while she pointed out dogs and birds and anything else that caught her attention. "She's going to rule the world someday," Serena said. "Probably. God help anyone who gets in her way." Damiano glanced down at her. "You ever regret it? The way this all started?" "Every day. And also never." "That doesn't make sense." "Nothing about us makes sense, but it works anyway." They reached the building just as the last light faded from the sky. Inside, the penthouse glowed warm and welcoming. Home, in every sense that mattered. After putting Sophia to bed, a process that involved 3 stories, 2 glasses of water, and extensive negotiations about bedtime, Serena and Damiano collapsed onto the living room couch. "I'm exhausted," she said, her head finding his shoulder with the ease of long practice. 5-year-olds are more tiring than hostile takeovers. Speaking from experience? Unfortunately, yes. They sat in comfortable silence, the city lights glittering beyond the windows. Somewhere out there, threats still existed. Enemies who remembered the old Moretti Empire and resented its evolution. Federal agents who'd never quite given up on building a case. Rivals waiting for a sign of weakness. But in here, they were safe. Or as safe as anyone could be in their world. "Do you think she'll understand someday?" Serena asked quietly. "When she's old enough to know the truth about what you used to do, what we built this life on. I hope so. But if she doesn't, if she chooses to walk away from all of it, I'll support that too." Damiano's arm tightened around her. "I spent my whole life trapped by my grandfather's legacy, defined by choices he made before I was born. I won't do that to her. Whatever Sophia becomes, whatever she chooses, that's her decision." "You're a good father." "I'm trying. That's the best I can do." Serena tilted her head up, kissed him softly. "It's enough. You're enough." And in that moment, in the home they'd built from accident and violence and impossible love, that was true. 10 years after the wedding, that wasn't supposed to be real. Serena stood in front of the mirror in their bedroom, adjusting the necklace Damiano had given her for their anniversary. Diamonds and emeralds, elegant without being ostentatious. The kind of jewelry that whispered wealth instead of screaming it. She was 40 now, lines at the corners of her eyes that hadn't been there a decade ago. Gray threads in her dark hair that she'd stopped dyeing because Damiano said they made her look distinguished. A body that had carried and birthed a child, that had survived a gunshot, that had weathered 10 years of stress and occasional terror. She looked different than the desperate girl who'd run through the rain toward a job interview that never existed. She looked like herself, finally, completely herself. Sophia was 12 now, sharp and curious, and already showing signs of her father's strategic mind combined with her mother's ability to read people. She attended an elite private school where nobody asked too many questions about her father's business interests, and she was thriving. The empire had fully legitimized 5 years ago. Damiano had sold the last of the criminal operations to a rival family for a sum that made even him blink. They'd plowed that money into foundations, scholarships, medical research. The Moretti name meant philanthropy now instead of fear. It had taken a decade and more hard choices than Serena could count, but they'd done it. Damiano stepped up behind her, his reflection joining hers in the mirror. He'd aged too, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes, but he wore it well, distinguished, like she'd said about her own gray hairs. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." Tonight was the opening of the Moretti Center for Medical Research, a state-of-the-art facility funded entirely by their foundation. It focused on the kind of diseases that had nearly killed Serena's mother, providing treatment and research for families who couldn't afford traditional care. It was their biggest public project yet, the culmination of years of work to transform their legacy into something that helped instead of hurt. The gala was packed with politicians, business people, medical professionals, and a few old faces from Damiano's past, who'd also managed to go legitimate. Marco was there with Claire, both of them looking genuinely happy. Luca and Vincent had retired to Florida, but flew up for the occasion. Elena had risen to COO of their hospitality division, commanding boardrooms with the same efficiency she'd once used to teach Serena how to survive dangerous dinners. Serena gave the opening speech, talking about her mother's struggle with illness, about the crushing weight of medical debt, about the mission to ensure no family ever had to choose between treatment and survival. When she finished, the applause was genuine. These weren't people afraid of the Moretti name. They were people grateful for it. Later, during the reception, Sophia found her parents on the terrace. "This is pretty cool," she said, mature beyond her 12 years. "What you guys built, what you're doing." "You think so?" Damiano asked. "Yeah. Better than what Grandpa built, right?" She said it casually, but there was weight behind the words. Serena and Damiano exchanged glances. They'd been honest with Sophia as she'd gotten older, honest about the family's past, about the violence and the choices that had shaped their present. She deserved to know the truth, even when it was ugly. "Much better," Serena said quietly. "But it took a long time and a lot of hard work to get here. Was it worth it?" "Every second," Damiano said without hesitation, "even the terrible parts, because they led to this." Sophia nodded, processing that with the serious expression she'd inherited from her father. Then she smiled, sudden and bright. "Can I bring my friends here for a field trip? Mrs. Patterson is always looking for science expedition sites." "Absolutely, I'll set it up." She hugged them both and ran off to find the dessert table, leaving her parents alone on the terrace overlooking the city. "We did it," Serena said softly. "We actually did it. Built something good from something terrible." "We did." Damiano pulled her close. "And it only took a decade, a gunshot wound, multiple assassination attempts, and completely rebuilding an empire from the ground up. When you put it that way, it sounds exhausting." "It was exhausting. Still is sometimes." He kissed her temple. "But I'd do it all again. Every terrifying, impossible moment. Because it gave me you, gave me Sophia, gave me a reason to be better than I was raised to be." Serena leaned into him, looking out at Manhattan glittering like a promise. Somewhere out there was the cathedral where this had all started. The restaurant where she'd waited tables. The apartment where she'd struggled to survive. All of it felt like a lifetime ago. Like it had happened to someone else. But it had happened to her. And she'd survived it. Thrived because of it. "You know what the craziest part is?" she said. "What?" "I walked into the wrong cathedral that day. Wrong building. Wrong wedding. Everything about it was a mistake. And it turned out to be the best mistake I ever made." Damiano laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Same. Best accidental wife a guy could ask for." They stood together on the terrace, surrounded by the life they'd built from chaos and gunpowder and impossible love, and Serena thought about the long, strange journey that had brought them here. From desperation to survival, from survival to strategy, from strategy to something real. It hadn't been easy. It had cost them both pieces of themselves they'd never get back. But standing here now, with everything they'd built spread out before them and their daughter's laughter drifting from inside, Serena couldn't bring herself to regret a single moment. Because sometimes the wrong door at the wrong time leads you to exactly the right place. And sometimes love built on survival transforms into something strong enough to change the world. They'd started with a lie that became truth, a contract that became forever, a marriage of convenience that became the realest thing in both their lives. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.